The first thing Constance Farleigh noticed was not that she had been seated alone. It was that the porcelain saucer before her had been repaired by a trembling hand, and no one in the room had cared enough to see it. London, spring 1817, had gathered itself into the polished drawing-room of Montague House, with all the softness and cruelty of a well-bred smile. Sunlight fell through tall windows upon gilt chairbacks, pale muslin gowns, trays of sugared biscuits, and ladies whose laughter never rose above what propriety allowed. Near the centre of the room, where the best light touched the newest bonnets, Lady Aurelia Voss held court beside a cluster of admirers. Near the porcelain cabinet, where the footmen passed less often, and the conversation thinned into polite neglect, Miss Constance Farleigh sat with her tea growing cold. She had not been banished exactly. No hostess with sense would be so vulgar. She had merely been placed where the room could forget her without appearing unkind. Constance had learned long ago that society possessed 100 ways to close a door while leaving it visibly open. She wore a dove-grey gown that had been turned twice, freshened at the cuffs and trimmed with narrow ribbon that could not quite conceal its age. Her gloves were clean. Her posture was faultless. Her expression was calm enough to disappoint anyone hoping she might look wounded. Beneath the folds of her reticule lay the one thing in the room she valued more than every Meissen shepherdess and Sèvres cup on display. Her mother's sable porcelain mending brush, wrapped in linen, its handle worn smooth where 2 generations of careful fingers had held it. It should not have been in a lady's reticule. It should not have been in a drawing-room at all. But Constance never went among breakable things without it, not because she expected to repair them there, before society's eyes, because touching the little wrapped handle steadied her when society remembered to remind her that useful hands were not the same as desirable ones. "Miss Farleigh," Lady Aurelia called, her voice, sweet enough to make insult seem like music. "You are examining Lady Montague's saucer as if it were a wounded soldier." A faint ripple of amusement passed among the ladies nearest her. Constance lifted her gaze. Lady Aurelia was all pale blue silk, golden hair, and the serene confidence of a woman who had never had to make an old gown look intentional. Beside her stood Sir Bertram Hale, a collector of porcelain and compliments, whose dark coat was cut with severe elegance, and whose smile had the smoothness of a sealed drawer. "Only as if it had survived one," Constance replied. Her voice carried no farther than necessary. "The handle has been off once. The mend is old." Lady Aurelia's brows rose. "How industrious of you to notice. It is easier to notice what one has been taught to see. Yes, of course. Your poor dear mother had some connection with repairs. Did she not?" The words were harmless in shape. Their intention was not. Several ladies glanced down at Constance's hands. One looked at the cup in her own fingers as though labor might be contagious. Constance set her saucer down with care. She had promised herself, before entering Montague House, that she would not blush for her mother. Not today. Not for Lady Aurelia. Not for anyone. "My mother had a gift for making broken things useful again," she said. "A rare talent, I have always thought." "Useful," Lady Aurelia repeated, and smiled. "How admirable." The room accepted the word in the tone it was offered. Useful, not elegant, not admired, not chosen. Useful meant a woman who could be summoned when something cracked, then dismissed before the guests arrived. It meant a gentlewoman whose father's fortune had thinned until invitations became favors, and favors had strings, and strings could be pulled by anyone with enough rank. Constance reached for her tea, then left it untouched. If her hand trembled, she would rather the cup not betray her. Behind Lady Aurelia, Sir Bertram's gaze moved not to Constance's face, but to the porcelain cabinet. Within it, on the second shelf, a vacant space waited beneath a small card written in Lady Montague's elegant hand. The Carrowmere Peacock Teapot, Chinese export, late 18th century, temporarily delayed. That absence had been discussed all afternoon with increasing curiosity. A ducal heirloom, promised for viewing and not yet shown, carried more power than any object already present. It allowed every guest to imagine the favour of the Duke of Carrowmere without the inconvenience of his actual presence. Sir Bertram tells us the Peacock Teapot is quite priceless, said Lady Aurelia, though I suppose to a trained eye, even priceless things are merely work. To a trained eye, Constance answered, priceless things are often more vulnerable than ordinary ones. People are careless with what they think cannot be replaced. The reply landed more firmly than she had intended. Sir Bertram's smile paused. Lady Aurelia gave a small laugh. How solemn. One would think the teapot had feelings. No, Constance said, but the people who remember it may. A brief silence opened around the porcelain cabinet. It was not admiration. Not yet. It was the startled quiet that followed when a woman expected to endure instead answered with dignity. Then a fan snapped closed near Constance's shoulder. That was well said, murmured a low female voice. Constance turned and found Matilda Ransom, Dowager Duchess of Carrowmere, standing so near that the black lace at her sleeve almost brushed Constance's chair. The Dowager Duchess was not tall, but the room behaved as if she were. Her silver hair was arranged beneath a cap of exquisite severity, and her dark eyes held the unsettling brightness of someone who had survived society by understanding every one of its knives. Constance moved to rise. Your Grace, do not stand, the Dowager said softly. It will only make them watch us sooner. Constance remained still, though every instinct in her urged her to gather her reticule and retreat into the safety of invisibility. I did not mean to speak impertinently. No, that is why it was effective. The Dowager's gaze went to the vacant space in the cabinet, then to Lady Aurelia, then to Sir Bertram. Tell me, Miss Farleigh, can you keep your countenance when people wish very badly for you to lose it? Constance looked toward the untouched tea in her cup. I have had practice. Yes, said Matilda Ransom. That is what I thought. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they made the air feel thin. Constance had been noticed before only when someone required a quiet service. A ribbon mended, a crack disguised, an old aunt entertained. A silence filled, but the Dowager was looking at her as though she were not a convenience, but a decision. Across the room, Lady Aurelia had begun speaking more loudly. Naturally, His Grace has shown great kindness to our family. Mamma says such attentions must be understood delicately, but I confess I never pretend not to notice what all London sees. A murmur followed. Someone whispered, Carrowmere. Another answered, it would be a brilliant match. Sir Bertram looked pleased. Too pleased. The Dowager's mouth tightened by the smallest degree. There it is, she said. Constance's fingers closed around the edge of her reticule. Through the fabric she felt the thin, familiar shape of her mother's brush. Your Grace. Matilda sat beside her without waiting for invitation. The movement altered the room. Conversations faltered, then resumed with strained brightness. A Dowager Duchess did not sit beside an impoverished Miss Farleigh by accident. Lady Aurelia saw it. Sir Bertram saw it. Constance felt their attention like a candle flame held too close to skin. The dowager leaned nearer, her voice lowering until it became no more than breath over porcelain. "My son will arrive within the quarter hour. If he enters this room unattached, Lady Aurelia Voss will leave it nearly betrothed to him." Constance stared at her. Surely his grace may refuse. A duke may refuse many things. He cannot always refuse a story once enough respectable people have agreed to tell it. Constance's heart began to beat harder. "I do not understand what this has to do with me." "You understand more than most women in this room. I understand China, Your Grace. Not ducal entanglements. Then understand this. Something valuable is being displayed today, and it is not only the teapot." The dowager's gaze held hers. "It is my son's name." Constance should have stood then. She should have curtsied, murmured that she was honored but unequal to such confidence, and returned home before any of Lady Aurelia's friends could sharpen the afternoon into scandal. Instead, she remained seated, because the dowager's voice contained no flattery, and because Constance had spent too many years watching powerful people break delicate things and call the damage inevitable. "What are you asking me?" she said. Matilda Ransom opened her fan, shielding both their faces from the room. Behind the painted silk, her next words arrived with the softness of a match struck in a dark chapel. "Pretend you're my son's fiancée." For one suspended second, Constance heard nothing, not the clink of cups, not Lady Aurelia's laugh, not the carriage wheels beyond the windows or the rustle of silk across the carpet. Only that impossible sentence, lying between them like a crack no honest repairer could ignore. "Your Grace," she said at last, and was relieved that her voice did not fail. "That is not a small falsehood. No, it is not even a safe one. No, and His Grace knows nothing of it." The dowager's eyes flickered, not with shame exactly, but with urgency. "Not yet." A strange, almost bitter amusement rose in Constance's throat and vanished before it could become a laugh. Of course the invisible woman would be asked to stand in the center of the room only when the center had become dangerous. "Why me?" she asked. Matilda did not answer at once. That restraint, more than any compliment, made Constance listen. "Because Lady Aurelia expects envy. You have none. Sir Bertram expects greed. You have too much pride for it. Society expects you to be grateful for any scrap of notice. You are not." Constance's hand tightened over the brush in her reticule. "You do not know me. I know what people reveal when they believe no one important is looking." The dowager's fan lowered a fraction. "You were humiliated, and you defended your mother's work rather than your own vanity. You saw the mend on that saucer before Sir Bertram did, though he has spent 20 minutes letting the room believe he sees everything. And when Lady Aurelia tried to make usefulness sound ugly, you did not let her." Across the room, a footman entered and bent to murmur to Lady Montague. A small disturbance passed from face to face. The Duke was near. Constance felt the room gather itself like a hand closing around a glass stem. "If I agree," she said, "my name is not to be bought. Agreed. It is not to be mocked when this ends. Agreed. And I will not invent affection for a man I have not met." The dowager looked at her for one long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "Excellent. That will make you far more convincing than half the women who have." Lady Aurelia began moving toward them, blue skirts whispering across the carpet. Sir Bertram followed, his eyes narrowed now. The vacant space in the porcelain cabinet seemed to gleam behind them, waiting for its missing treasure and whatever else had been hidden with it. Constance rose before they reached her. Not quickly, not nervously. She stood as her mother had taught her to hold a repaired cup, with care, with balance, and with no apology for the visible seam. "Very well, Your Grace," she said. "Until His Grace tells me otherwise, I shall pretend." The dowager rose beside her and slipped one gloved hand lightly beneath Constance's elbow, not as command, but as presentation. "My dear Lady Aurelia," Matilda called, her voice carrying just enough to still the room. "You must forgive me for monopolizing Miss Farleigh. I have been congratulating myself on my son's discretion." Lady Aurelia stopped. "Your son's discretion? Naturally." The dowager's smile was perfect. One does not announce a private understanding before the lady herself is ready to be known. Every cup in the room seemed to pause halfway to someone's lips. Constance felt the full force of society turn toward her, astonished, doubtful, hungry. For the first time that afternoon, she was no longer beside the cabinet because she had been forgotten. She was beside it because everyone was looking. Then, from the doorway, the footman's voice rang clear. "His Grace, the Duke of Carrowmere." The room had not yet recovered from the Dowager Duchess's announcement when the footman spoke the Duke's name, and in that suspended moment, Constance Farleigh understood that a falsehood could have weight. It settled on her shoulders more heavily than any borrowed shawl. It altered the air around her. Women who had looked through her all afternoon now looked directly at her, and not with kindness. A few faces showed astonishment. Others showed calculation. Lady Aurelia Voss showed neither. Her expression became smooth, almost luminous, as if she had been waiting her entire life to be publicly insulted in a room full of witnesses, and knew exactly how to make use of it. "Your Grace," she said to Matilda, with a laugh too delicate to be believed. "I fear I must have misheard. Did you say Miss Farleigh and His Grace have a private understanding?" The words, private understanding, drifted outward like perfume with poison beneath it. A private understanding meant whispers, carriage glances, letters, promises, impropriety if mismanaged, romance if properly sanctioned, and ruin if denied. Constance felt the phrase tighten around her name. She did not move. The dowager's gloved hand rested lightly beneath her elbow, steady but not restraining. That distinction mattered. "You did not mishear," Matilda said, though I would not recommend repeating the phrase in that tone. It makes innocence sound like a vice. A faint murmur rose. Lady Montague, their hostess, clutched her fan as though porcelain had shattered at her feet instead of a social expectation. Sir Bertram Hale stepped closer to Lady Aurelia, his gaze moving over Constance with the cold interest of a man assessing a flaw in glaze. "How delightful," he said, "and how unexpected. Miss Farleigh, you must forgive our surprise. His Grace has been so often in Lady Aurelia's company of late that London's imagination had begun to make other arrangements." Constance heard the trap. If she protested too strongly, she would seem defensive. If she acted coy, she would become ridiculous. If she claimed tenderness, the lie would grow teeth. She inclined her head, no more than necessary. London's imagination is not known for requesting permission before it arranges anything, Sir Bertram. A woman near the tea table made a sound that might have been a smothered laugh. Sir Bertram's smile remained, but his eyes cooled. Lady Aurelia turned toward Constance fully now. "Then perhaps you will satisfy us where imagination has failed. When did His Grace first form this attachment?" The question struck exactly where Constance had feared it would. A date could be disproved. A place could be challenged. A story could be compared against servants, invitations, and calling cards. She knew nothing of the Duke except that he had a formidable mother. a threatened name, and a peacock teapot whose absence had made half the room restless. Her pulse beat once, hard. Then she thought of the repaired saucer. A false repair announced itself when too much paste was applied. A good repair used only what the break required. His Grace's private regard, she said, is not a trinket for a tea table. The room went quiet enough for the silver spoon beside Lady Montague's cup to sound too loud when it shifted against the saucer. Matilda's fingers gave the smallest approving pressure at Constance's elbow before releasing her entirely. Lady Aurelia's smile thinned. "How very loyal of you." "How very cautious," Sir Bertram corrected softly. "A quality much prized in ducal households, I am sure." "And in collectors," Constance said, letting her gaze pass once toward the vacant shelf in the porcelain cabinet, particularly when a valuable object has not yet appeared. The remark was mild. It should have been nothing. Yet Sir Bertram's attention sharpened so quickly that Constance knew she had touched something beneath the surface. Not proof, not even suspicion she could name, only the tiny shift of a man who disliked anyone noticing the empty space behind his performance. Lady Aurelia followed the direction of Constance's glance and laughed again. "Surely you are not implying that Sir Bertram misplaced a ducal heirloom?" "He has been advising Mamma for weeks on the exhibition. His judgment is considered excellent." "I implied nothing," Constance said. "I observed that the shelf is empty, useful and observant," Lady Aurelia said. "His Grace has discovered a marvel." The insult arrived wrapped in compliment. Constance accepted it as one accepts a cup with a crack near the handle, carefully and without trust. "Then I must hope he values marvels that do not announce themselves." Around them, the guests shifted, caught between the pleasure of scandal and the discomfort of watching a woman they had dismissed refuse to fall. Lady Montague moved forward at last, smiling with the desperate diplomacy of a hostess whose drawing room had become a battlefield. "Perhaps we might all take more tea before His Grace is brought in. He has only just arrived below, I believe. Men are so slow with hats and greetings." No one wished for tea. Everyone wished for the Duke to enter and either confirm the impossible or reduce Miss Farleigh to ashes with one puzzled stare. Constance understood it perfectly. Society did not love romance nearly as much as it loved the instant romance became evidence. Matilda turned to her, speaking low enough that only Constance could hear. "You are doing well." "I haven't begun to do anything," Constance murmured. "Yes," said the Dowager. "That is why you are doing well." It was absurd. It was terrifying. It almost made Constance smile. Almost. Lady Aurelia drew nearer, her blue skirts whispering against the carpet. At close range, she was even more beautiful and less warm. Her eyes flicked toward Constance's reticule, then her gloves. "I do hope His Grace has given you something more suitable than secrecy, Miss Farleigh. A ring, perhaps? A bracelet? One hates to think of a lady so privately cherished and so publicly unadorned." Heat climbed Constance's throat. Not shame for having no jewels. Anger that poverty could be made to sound like moral failure by a woman who had never been asked to choose between ribbon and coal. She thought of saying nothing. Silence had carried her safely through many rooms. But silence would not carry her through this one. "There are gifts that make a spectacle of the giver," she said, "and there are respects that do not need stones to prove them." "How philosophical," Aurelia replied, "or economical." A few ladies smiled. Sir Bertram watched Constance as if waiting for a crack to lengthen. Matilda's fan paused in her hand, but she did not rescue her. Constance realized, with a strange steadiness, that the dowager was allowing her to stand, not abandoning her, allowing her. That too mattered. Constance lifted her cup at last, though the tea had gone cool. Economy is no disgrace, Lady Aurelia. It often teaches a person to know the value of what others merely price. The words crossed the room more cleanly than she expected. Lady Aurelia's colour changed by the faintest degree. Lady Montague stared at the tea-urn. Sir Bertram's jaw tightened. The Dowager Duchess smiled into her fan. Then footsteps sounded beyond the drawing-room doors. Male voices, a pause. The room arranged itself without command. Spines straightened, fans lifted. Mothers drew daughters into prettier light. Lady Aurelia turned half toward the entrance, already composing the expression she wished the Duke to see. Constance remained where she was, beside the porcelain cabinet, with no jewel on her hand, no true claim to the name now tied to hers, and her mother's mending brush hidden against her palm through the silk of her reticule. She had expected fear to swallow her. Instead, she felt something clearer. If she was to be exposed, she would at least not decorate the lie with foolishness. She would not say she loved a man she had never met. She would not pretend tenderness for the entertainment of women who had mocked work, because they had never needed to work. And she would not let Lady Aurelia make her mother's hands into something shameful. The door opened, but the Duke did not immediately enter the room. A servant stepped in first, carrying a folded note upon a small silver salver. He crossed not to Lady Montague, but to Sir Bertram Hale. Sir Bertram took the note, read it, and for 1 second the satisfaction left his face. It returned quickly, but Constance had seen the absence. So had Matilda. "A delay?" the Dowager asked pleasantly. Sir Bertram folded the note. "Only a matter concerning the display, Your Grace." "The display," Lady Montague echoed, too loudly. Lady Aurelia recovered faster than her hostess. "The Peacock Teapot, I assume. How tiresome. I hoped His Grace would see it at once." "He shall," Sir Bertram said, "when it is placed to advantage." Matilda's voice turned soft. "Objects of real value do not require advantage, Sir Bertram. Only light." Constance looked again at the empty shelf. A strange unease moved through her. The room believed the engagement was the scandal. She was no longer certain it was the only one. Lady Aurelia must have sensed the shift, for she reached out and touched Constance's sleeve with 2 fingers, a gesture too intimate for kindness and too public to refuse. "You must be anxious," she said. "A duke's arrival can be overwhelming when one is unaccustomed to consequence." Constance looked down at the fingers on her sleeve, then back at Lady Aurelia's face. "I'm accustomed to consequence," she said quietly. "I'm merely less accustomed to people mistaking it for ornament." This time the silence was sharper. Lady Aurelia withdrew her hand. Before she could answer, the footman returned to the doorway, and behind him the hall seemed to darken, with the presence of a man who did not hurry because no one in England could reasonably require him to. Leopold Ransom, Duke of Carrowmere, stepped into the drawing-room. He was not what Constance expected. She had imagined severity, perhaps arrogance, perhaps the bored impatience of a man born too high to notice where his shadow fell. He had all the polish of rank, dark coat fitted precisely, cravat arranged with careless perfection, shoulders easy beneath the weight of every gaze in the room. Yet his expression was not bored, it was alert. His eyes moved first to his mother, then to Lady Aurelia, then to Sir Bertram's folded note. Only after that did they come to rest on Constance. He did not smile, he did not frown, but something in his gaze stilled, as if he had walked into a room expecting one sort of danger and found another seated beside the porcelain cabinet in dove-grey silk. Lady Aurelia swept forward with perfect grace. "Your Grace, we've been longing for your arrival. Have you?" His voice was deep, pleasant, and edged with a wit too controlled to be called warmth. "Then I must apologize for depriving the room of so much longing." A few ladies laughed because dukes made laughter permissible. Lady Aurelia's smile brightened. "Your mother has astonished us." "My mother considers astonishment a household economy. She produces it whenever conversation grows poor." Matilda's eyes narrowed in warning. Leopold looked at her again, and Constance saw the instant he understood that the situation was worse than social mischief. His gaze returned to Constance. Lady Aurelia did not let silence settle. "Your fiancé has been telling us so little." The word struck the room like a spoon against crystal. Fiancé, spoken plainly now, offered to him like a blade handle first. Constance felt every face turn toward the Duke. Her own body wished to lower its eyes. She did not permit it. If he denied her, she would stand. If he laughed, she would stand. If he looked through her, as others had done all afternoon, she would still stand. Leopold Ransom crossed the room, not to Lady Aurelia, not to Sir Bertram. To Constance, the distance was not great, but the silence made it ceremonial. He stopped before her and bowed with exact courtesy, as though she were not an embarrassment placed in his path, but a lady whose dignity required his full attention. "Miss Farleigh," he said, "I fear I have kept you waiting." Constance heard Lady Aurelia draw a quiet breath. She heard Matilda's fan close. She heard her own heart steadying against all reason. The Duke extended no false tenderness. He offered no invented jewel, no theatrical devotion, no easy lie that would demand more lies later. He gave her only public courtesy at the moment when public cruelty had expected to feast. Constance curtsied. "Your Grace," she said, and her voice did not break. "The tea has been very instructive." His eyes flickered once, as if he understood more than the words gave him. "Then I regret missing the lesson." Sir Bertram stepped forward, smiling again. "Not entirely, Your Grace. I believe the most interesting portion has only begun." At that, from somewhere beyond the open doors, came the faint sound of porcelain being carried on a tray, not the bright music of cups. Something heavier, something singular. Every head turned toward the hall. Constance's gaze moved to the vacant shelf beneath the little card. The Carrowmere Peacock Teapot was coming at last, and with it she felt certain, the first true crack in the room. The sound from the hall drew every eye before the object itself appeared, and Constance knew at once that expectation had become another guest in the room. It moved from fan to fan, from tightened mouth to lifted brow, from Lady Aurelia's beautifully controlled smile to Sir Bertram Hale's hand closing around the folded note he had not meant anyone to see. 2 footmen entered, bearing a long covered tray between them. The cloth over it was dark green, heavy enough to conceal the shape beneath, but not heavy enough to hide the careful way they carried it. Whatever rested there was valuable, fragile, and dangerous in a manner porcelain seldom managed alone. The Duke of Carrowmere did not look at the tray first. He looked at his mother. Matilda Ransom gave him only the smallest lift of her chin, a signal so slight Constance would have missed it, had she not spent a lifetime reading what polite rooms refused to say aloud. Then His Grace looked at Sir Bertram. "I appear to have arrived during a ceremony," he said. "How fortunate. I have always found ordinary tea insufficiently theatrical." A few ladies laughed, relieved to be given permission. Lady Aurelia answered before anyone else could. "It is no ceremony, Your Grace. only the long-awaited display of your family's peacock teapot. We had begun to fear you were keeping it from us." "From the room?" he asked, "or from you in particular?" The words were light. Their effect was not. Lady Aurelia's lashes lowered, then rose again. "From all admirers of beauty, naturally. Then I must be careful. Beauty has a terrible habit of acquiring witnesses when it wishes to become a claim." Constance kept her face still, though the remark passed through the room like a blade under silk. He knew, not everything, perhaps not even half, but he had entered a room where his mother had presented him with a fiancée, where Lady Aurelia had expected a victory, and where Sir Bertram waited beside a covered heirloom. He had understood enough to choose caution. Sir Bertram bowed with professional warmth. "Your Grace," Lady Voss requested only that the teapot be viewed in proper company. Its history deserves appreciation. "My family objects have survived worse than appreciation," the Duke said, "though not always intact." Lady Montague gave a nervous flutter. Perhaps the tray might be placed in the centre, where everyone may admire it. The footman shifted. One corner of the green cloth trembled. The younger footman, felt with the terror of being responsible for a ducal heirloom before half of London's most observant women, adjusted his grip too quickly. A saucer resting near the edge of the tea table beside Constance jerked as his elbow brushed the stand. It slid. Constance moved by instinct. So did the Duke. Their hands reached the saucer at the same time, stopping it just before it tipped from the polished wood. For the briefest moment, his fingers touched hers around the porcelain rim. His hand was warm, steady, and immediately withdrawn once the danger passed. It was nothing. It was less than nothing by the measure of any worldly woman in that room. Yet Constance felt the contact as clearly as if the saucer had rung like a bell. Not because it was intimate. It was not. Because he had not snatched, claimed, or displayed. He had saved the object and released both it and her at once. "Forgive me," he said quietly, though the fault had not been his. "No harm done, Your Grace." Her voice remained even. She wished her pulse had done the same. She looked down at the saucer to steady herself and noticed the old metal staple marks beneath the handle. Though the saucer has been harmed before, the Duke's gaze sharpened. Has it? Constance should have stopped. Ladies did not examine household objects in a drawing room as though they stood at a workbench. Poor gentlewomen did not instruct dukes in front of rivals. Pretend fiancés did not reveal that their knowledge came from labor, but Lady Aurelia had spent the afternoon making usefulness an accusation, and Constance had already crossed a threshold from which silence would not rescue her. "The handle was broken and repaired years ago," she said. "The old staple holes are visible under the glaze if the light strikes low. Whoever repaired it did not use enough fill at the join, but the alignment was careful." The Duke bent his head slightly, not toward the saucer, but toward her. "You saw that at a glance?" "No," she replied, "at two." His mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close enough to unsettle her. "Then I stand corrected." Lady Aurelia's laugh arrived too late. "Miss Farleigh has made quite a study of cracks, Your Grace." "A useful study," he said, "particularly in rooms where so many people prefer varnish." The room quieted again. This time, Constance did not lower her eyes. It was the first time in many years that someone of consequence had defended her skill without sounding charitable. Lady Aurelia's beauty did not alter, but something beneath it tightened. "How loyal you are already," she said. "We were all wondering, of course, how long this understanding has existed. Miss Farleigh is admirably discreet, but surely a bridegroom may be less severe." bridegroom. The word was too much, too soon, and everyone knew it. It asked the Duke to either accept the role or laugh it aside. Constance felt the danger open beneath her feet. The Duke turned fully toward Lady Aurelia. I have often found that what everyone wonders is rarely improved by being answered. But society must know something, Aurelia insisted, still smiling. Must it? An engagement cannot live entirely in shadows. No, he said, but nor should it be dragged beneath chandeliers merely to satisfy those who did not receive the first confidence. Lady Aurelia coloured. Sir Bertram stepped in with the ease of a man accustomed to smoothing a table before placing a wager upon it. No offence was intended, Your Grace. Lady Aurelia speaks from affection for your house. The Voss family has taken great care over your teapot's presentation. So I gather. The Duke's eyes went to the covered tray at last. Yet it arrived under cloth, late, after a note that troubled you, and in the hands of a footman who looks as if he would rather carry a sleeping tiger. That seems a great deal of care. Sir Bertram's smile remained fixed. Precious things demand precautions, indeed. The Duke looked back at Constance. Miss Farleigh, do precious things demand secrecy before they may be admired? The question placed her in peril and rescued her at once. It asked for her judgment publicly, but not as a trick. Every eye shifted to her again. She chose her words with care. Secrecy protects value only when danger is outside the room, Your Grace. When danger is inside the room, secrecy protects the danger. A silence fell so cleanly that even Lady Montague stopped fluttering her fan. The Duke watched Constance for a beat longer than courtesy required. She could not read his expression. It held surprise, perhaps approval, and something more guarded than both. A distinction worth remembering, he said. Lady Aurelia's smile sharpened. Miss Farleigh speaks very boldly for a lady newly acknowledged. Miss Farleigh speaks clearly, the Duke replied. There is a difference. There it was. Protection. Not warm, not romantic, not even personal yet, but public, precise, and undeniable. Constance felt the room adjust around it. She had not become safer. If anything, she had become more exposed. But she had not been abandoned. Sir Bertram bowed again, his smoothness returning with effort. Then perhaps, Your Grace, you will permit the unveiling. The ladies have waited long enough. The Duke did not move. Have they? How cruel of us to make society wait for porcelain when it has been so patient in every other respect. The faint laughter that followed did not reach Sir Bertram's eyes. He signalled to the footman. The green cloth was lifted. Beneath it, on a bed of folded velvet, stood the Carrowmere Peacock Teapot. A soft exclamation passed through the room. Even Constance, who had trained herself never to gape before wealth, felt her breath pause. The teapot was extraordinary. A peacock curved around the body in brilliant blue-green enamel, its tail sweeping into the handle, its head lifted proudly upon the spout. Gold lines marked old repairs beneath one wing, delicate as threads of sunlight trapped in porcelain. Or they should have. Constance stood too far away to be certain. But something in the rhythm of those lines troubled her. One bright mark seemed absent where the curve required balance. Sir Bertram noticed her looking. His eyes narrowed. The Duke noticed Sir Bertram noticing. You are very attentive, Miss Farleigh, Lady Aurelia said. I hope you are not searching for another wound. Constance drew her gaze back before suspicion could become accusation. No, Lady Aurelia, I am only admiring what has survived. Survived, Sir Bertram repeated. A curious word. An honest one, she said. The Duke stepped closer to the tray, then stopped before touching it. My mother, always. said the teapot was repaired after my grandfather's steward dropped it during a move from Hampshire. Matilda's face remained composed, but Constance saw the quick flash of interest in her eyes. The Duke had not meant merely to reminisce. He was testing the room. Sir Bertram gave a short bow. A famous repair, 3 gold staples beneath the wing, if memory serves. He spoke confidently, too confidently. Constance looked again. From where she stood, the old repair line showed only 2 clear gleams. Perhaps the angle deceived her. Perhaps the third lay hidden under the curve. Perhaps she was imagining danger, because danger had surrounded her since the dowager first sat beside her. Yet her mother had taught her that porcelain told the truth most clearly where people expected ornament. The Duke turned from the teapot to Constance. "Miss Farleigh," he said, in a tone the room could hear, "when we are alone with my mother, you will tell me exactly what engagement I have entered." Lady Aurelia's eyes glittered. "How mysterious." "Not mysterious," he said, "merely overdue." Then he offered Constance his arm, not closely, not possessively, only enough to make refusal impossible for the room and possible for her. His gaze held hers, and in it she read a question hidden beneath the courtesy. "Will you allow this?" Constance looked at his arm, then at the porcelain peacock gleaming beneath the candles, then at the faces waiting for her to betray either eagerness or fear. She placed her gloved fingertips lightly where propriety permitted. "Very well, Your Grace," she said. "I believe we have several matters to discuss." His answer was low enough that only she and perhaps the dowager heard it. "I have begun to suspect, Miss Farleigh, that we have more than one." The Duke did not take Constance from the drawing-room so much as remove her from the center of a storm before society realized it had been deprived of spectacle. His arm remained beneath her gloved fingertips only until they crossed the threshold. The instant they entered the corridor, he gave her the choice to release him by the smallest turn of his wrist, and she did. That courtesy, slight as it was, steadied her more than any elaborate gallantry could have done. Behind them, the drawing-room resumed breathing. Lady Aurelia's voice rose in a bright remark about the Peacock Teapot's magnificent colouring. Sir Bertram answered with polished confidence. The footman shifted near the covered tray, yet Constance could still feel the room's gaze between her shoulder blades, as if every whisper had followed her into the hall. Matilda Ransom walked ahead with the composure of a general retreating only to choose better ground. "The morning room," she said to the waiting footman. "No callers, no refreshments, and if Lady Montague asks where we have gone, tell her I have developed a maternal headache." The Duke glanced at his mother. "How convenient. Does it trouble your conscience to make motherhood perform so many tasks?" "Less than it troubles me to have a son who arrives late to his own ambush." "I was not informed there would be one. Ambushes lose their freshness when printed on invitation cards." Constance would have found the exchange amusing under any other circumstances. As it was, each step along the corridor seemed to carry her farther from safety, not closer to it. She had agreed to pretend before the Duke arrived. She had allowed his mother to use her name. He had shielded her in public, yes. But now the door would close, and private outrage could do what public courtesy had not. The morning room was smaller than the drawing room and blessedly quieter. Its walls were hung with pale green silk. A coal fire burned low in the grate, though the spring afternoon was mild. A writing table stood near the window, and upon it someone had arranged a vase of white lilac beside a stack of folded invitations. Matilda entered first. Constance followed. The Duke came last and shut the door. not with a slam, but with a precision that made the latch sound final. For a moment no one spoke. Constance stood near a chair and did not sit. She would not make herself comfortable in another family's crisis, until she understood whether she had become guest, accomplice, or sacrifice. Leopold Ransom turned to his mother. In the drawing room, his wit had been silk over steel. Here the silk vanished. Explain. Matilda removed her gloves finger by finger. Lady Aurelia's family has spent 6 weeks arranging the appearance of expectation. You have escorted her twice because her carriage conveniently failed. You attended the Voss musicale because Lord Voss made it a political courtesy. You lent the Peacock Teapot for a private viewing because I asked you to support Lady Montague's patronage circle. Each separate act was harmless. Together, Sir Bertram has made them into a courtship. Sir Bertram has no authority over my courtship. No, he has authority over the story of it if half the room repeats it before dinner. The Duke's jaw tightened, and your solution was to announce that I had formed a private understanding with a woman I have never met. I did not announce it, Matilda said. I allowed it to be understood, a distinction beloved by cowards and diplomats. Then you should appreciate it twice. His eyes flashed, but Constance saw that his anger was not wild. It was disciplined, which made it more dangerous. He turned to her. Miss Farleigh, did my mother offer you time to refuse? The question struck her because it was not the accusation she had expected. There was no immediate charge of ambition, no sneer over poverty, no assumption that she had been waiting for a duke to fall within reach. He asked first whether she had been given choice. Constance folded her hands before her. She offered me enough time to understand that refusal would not make the room kinder. Something moved in his face. That is not the same as time. No, Your Grace, but it is more than women like Lady Aurelia offer. Matilda's expression did not change, but approval warmed the silence. Leopold looked from Constance to his mother and back again. And what did you agree to? To pretend until you told me otherwise. With what inducement? There it was. The sharp edge at last. Constance felt heat rise along her cheekbones. But she kept her voice level. None. No promise of money. No. No settlement for your father. No. No hope that a false engagement might become a true one if pressed hard enough. The question was cold. It had to be. A duke did not survive long by believing every gentlewoman in distress was harmless. Still, it touched the bruise Lady Aurelia had been pressing all afternoon. Constance reached into her reticule and closed her fingers around the wrapped handle of her mother's brush. I have hopes, Your Grace. They are not so undisciplined as to attach themselves to a stranger within the hour. Matilda gave a soft sound that might have been a cough. The Duke held Constance's gaze. Then, to her surprise, his severity eased by a single degree. A fair rebuke, it was not intended as one. Then you must practice. It served very well. Constance looked away first, not from fear, but because the moment had become too keen. Praise from him did not feel like flattery. It felt like being seen in clear light, which was far more unsettling. Matilda moved to the writing table and lifted the top invitation. Lady Voss intends a porcelain supper in 2 days. The teapot is to be displayed more formally there. Sir Bertram has advised the arrangement. He is not merely pushing Aurelia toward Carrowmere. He is using Carrowmere objects to do it. The Duke crossed the room. Why was I not told your suspicions sooner? Because until this afternoon they were only suspicions. And now, Matilda's eyes flicked to Constance. Now Miss Farleigh noticed the empty shelf, Sir Bertram's discomfort, and the language around value and secrecy. I dislike coincidences when they gather so neatly. Constance stiffened. Your Grace, I noticed very little that could be called evidence. Good, Leopold said. Then you will not be tempted to exaggerate it. She blinked. That was not an insult. No, it was the first sensible thing I have heard since entering Montague House. He went to the fire, then turned back. My mother has placed you in danger. I will not pretend otherwise. If I deny the understanding now, Lady Aurelia becomes wounded innocence. My mother becomes a schemer, and you become either grasping or discarded, depending on which version entertains the room most. If I confirm it, you become a target. I had gathered that society was unlikely to reward me for the performance. Society rewards very little except obedience and inheritance. Then, perhaps, society is overpriced. The words slipped out before Prudence could catch them. The Duke looked at her. One corner of his mouth moved. Miss Farleigh, I begin to see why my mother chose you. Because I am expendable. His expression changed at once. No, the word was quiet, but it stopped the room. Because you are not. Constance had no answer ready for that. She distrusted it, of course. Words cost dukes nothing when spoken in private. Yet he had said it without ornament and without trying to soften what his mother had done. Matilda, for once, looked away. The fire settled in the grate. If this continues, Constance said, I require terms. Leopold's brows lifted. You require them? Yes, Your Grace. If my name is to stand beside yours, even falsely, then it will not be dragged there like a chair placed for convenience. Matilda sat very still. Leopold inclined his head. Name them. Constance breathed once slowly. First, there will be no invented romance, no secret letters, no false tokens, no sentimental history. I will not counterfeit affection. Agreed. Second, you will not pay me personally. If I am compensated like an actress hired for a private stage, Lady Aurelia need only discover it to ruin me. Agreed. Third, when this ends, it ends with a public correction sufficient to protect my name. Agreed. He answered too quickly, almost sharply, and she realized his anger had turned from her toward the situation. Anything else? Yes. Her voice softened, but did not weaken. If I observe something regarding the teapot, the display, or Sir Bertram, I will not be dismissed because my knowledge came through work rather than birth. The Duke's gaze dropped briefly to her reticule, not rudely, thoughtfully. You repair porcelain. It was not a question. My mother did. I learned beside her. And society knows when it needs a crack hidden before guests arrive. It forgets when it wishes to discuss accomplishments. Then society has poor eyesight. Constance's fingers loosened around the brush. It sees rank very clearly. Rank is large. Truth is often smaller. He paused. Very well. Your judgment will be heard. But you must also hear mine. If a threat becomes too great, I will tell you. Tell me, yes. Decide for me, no. Matilda's fan opened slowly. This is becoming unexpectedly healthy. The Duke gave his mother a look. You are not forgiven. I did not imagine I was. A knock came at the door. At Leopold's command, the footman entered with a small silver tray bearing a folded card. From Lady Voss, Your Grace, delivered before the household could refuse it. Leopold took it, read, and handed it to Matilda. She read aloud. Lady Voss requests the honour of His Grace, the Dowager Duchess, and Miss Farleigh at a porcelain supper 2 evenings hence, where the Carrowmere Peacock shall be admired among friends. Constance heard the trap beneath the elegance, among friends, before witnesses, with the teapot at the centre, and her false position newly attached to it. Leopold took back the card and held it near the fire. though he did not burn it. She moves quickly. So must we, Matilda said. He looked at Constance. Miss Farleigh, you may still withdraw. I will claim misunderstanding and absorb what damage I can. It was the first clean exit anyone had offered her all afternoon. It tempted her more than she wished to admit. She thought of her father's anxious face over unpaid accounts, of her mother's brush wrapped in linen, of Lady Aurelia's fingers touching her sleeve, as though poverty could be inspected like a stain. She thought of the peacock teapot beneath the green cloth, beautiful and wrong in some way she could not yet prove. No, she said, if I leave now, they will still tell a story. I would rather be present to hear it. The Duke studied her with a stillness that made the room seem smaller. Then we continue. Until the exhibition week ends, she said. Until the truth is visible, he answered. Matilda rose. Good. Then, for the next several days, London may believe my son has finally behaved with romantic discretion. Mother, do try not to look so pained, Leopold. It will make you less convincing. For the first time since the drawing-room, Constance almost smiled. The Duke saw it. Not fully, only the beginning, yet his gaze caught there for one unguarded second before he turned away. It was not romance, not yet. It was something more fragile and perhaps more dangerous. Recognition. Outside the morning-room, voices gathered again. The tea was ending. The story was beginning, and on the writing table between them, Lady Voss's invitation waited like a porcelain crack, filled with gold only on the surface, by the time the Voss porcelain supper arrived. 2 evenings later, Constance had learned that a false engagement did not behave like a lie once society had been invited to admire it. It grew. It gathered lace, speculation, half-smiles, and the particular kind of silence that followed a lady into a room before anyone troubled to greet her. Lady Voss's townhouse in Grosvenor Square had been arranged as if for a diplomatic triumph rather than a supper. Candles multiplied themselves in mirrors. Cabinets had been drawn forward from the walls. Blue ribbons marked the objects Sir Bertram Hale considered worthy of special notice, and every polished surface seemed prepared to reflect either admiration or disgrace. Constance entered with Matilda Ransom at her side, and felt, at once, the difference between being ignored and being studied. Ignorance had been lonely. Study was colder. Her dove-grey gown had been brushed, pressed, and altered at the neckline by her own careful hand. No one looking quickly would know it had served 3 seasons. Anyone looking closely would. Lady Aurelia Voss looked closely. Miss Farleigh, she said, drifting forward in pale rose silk. How brave of you to come. Some ladies would have hidden themselves after such sudden happiness. I have never found hiding to improve a room, Constance replied. Only the opinion of those who wish not to see me. Lady Aurelia's smile did not falter, but the 2 young ladies behind her exchanged glances. Matilda's fan opened with a soft click. Lady Aurelia, you mistake happiness for weather. It does not require shelter merely because it arrives unexpectedly. How wise, Your Grace. Aurelia turned her attention back to Constance. His Grace is already here. He has been speaking with Sir Bertram about the display. I dare say men are safest when discussing objects. They grow so awkward when discussing feelings. Then London must be overflowing with comfortable gentlemen, Constance said. Before Aurelia could answer, Leopold Ransom crossed the room. He did not hurry. A duke never needed to. Yet he came directly enough that those in his path moved aside without pretending they had meant to. His dark evening coat held no ornament beyond perfect tailoring, and his expression wore the mild amusement Constance had begun to suspect he used when danger stood within hearing. "Miss Farleigh," he said, bowing, "you have arrived just in time to prevent Sir Bertram from educating me beyond recovery." Sir Bertram, standing near the central cabinet, gave a smooth laugh. "His Grace underrates his patience." "Frequently," Leopold said, "but never my need for rescue." Constance curtsied. "I would hesitate to rescue a gentleman from knowledge, Your Grace. It may prove useful, even when inconvenient." His eyes warmed for a fraction of a second. Not enough for anyone else to call it tenderness. Enough for her to notice. "Then perhaps you will determine which portions are knowledge and which are embroidery." He offered her not his arm, for that would have made a theatre of them, but his attention. In that room it was nearly as dangerous. Sir Bertram gestured toward the cabinet with the air of a priest approaching a relic. "The Carrowmere Peacock, ladies and gentlemen." The doors were opened. A collective sigh passed through the guests. The teapot stood beneath candlelight on dark velvet, its peacock body shining in blue, green, and gold. At Montague House, it had seemed extraordinary, even under cloth and distance. Here, displayed at advantage, it appeared almost alive. The curved spout forming the proud bird's head, the handle sweeping like tail feathers, the enamel deep as peacock throat beneath rain. Constance wanted, despite herself, to admire it. Then the old discomfort returned. Something was wrong beneath the wing. The repair line should have possessed a rhythm. 3 gold staples, Sir Bertram had said. 3 would balance the curve, where the porcelain had once opened and been drawn together again. But under the wing, where candlelight skimmed the enamel, Constance saw only 2 sure flashes and a dull place where a third should have been. Worse, the blue-green glaze above that space did not quite belong to the rest. It was beautiful, too beautiful in the wrong way. "You are staring," Lady Aurelia said gently. "Is it admiration, or are you searching for work?" A few guests smiled. Constance kept her hands still at her sides. "Sometimes the two are not opposed. You must forgive me. I have never known whether ladies who repair things can still admire them without calculating where to put the paste. And I have never known whether ladies who inherit perfect things understand the courage of what has survived a break." The smiles around them faded. Leopold's gaze did not leave Constance's face. Sir Bertram interposed himself with pleasant authority. "A poetic sentiment, but this object has been examined by those qualified to judge it. The repair is part of its history, not a matter for alarm. History is often where alarm begins," Constance said softly. Lady Aurelia laughed. "Miss Farleigh, surely you are not about to correct Sir Bertram on porcelain." The room sharpened. There it was, the trap made public. If Constance retreated, she became foolish for having stared. If she spoke, she became impertinent. Sir Bertram looked almost kind, which made him more dangerous. "I would welcome any observation," he said, "even from an unconventional source." Leopold stepped a little closer to the cabinet, as would I. Lady Aurelia turned to him. "Your Grace." Miss Farleigh noticed a repair on Lady Montague's saucer that escaped everyone else in the room, myself included. "A saucer is hardly a ducal heirloom." "No," Leopold said. "A saucer is less likely to be flattered into silence." A quiet laugh moved through the nearest guests. Aurelia's eyes flashed. Constance felt the weight of Leopold's choice. He had not declared her correct. He had done something better. He had made it possible for her to speak without appearing to beg permission from cruelty. Still, the cabinet glass stood between her and certainty. She leaned nearer, careful not to touch the case. The candlelight fell badly across the wing. Her breath slowed. She forgot, for 2 heartbeats, Lady Aurelia, Sir Bertram, and the false engagement. She saw only porcelain, old fire, old fracture, and the new lie hiding in brilliance. The glaze near the lower wing is not consistent with the body, she said. Sir Bertram's smile held. Lighting can be mischievous. Yes, but old glaze absorbs light differently where it has rested through years of smoke, washing, and handling. This patch catches it too cleanly. Lady Aurelia tilted her head. How exacting. Constance ignored her. There should also be a 3rd gold staple beneath the wing. I see 2. The spacing suggests a missing point, unless the 3rd lies obscured by the curve. Sir Bertram's fingers tightened behind his back. It was a small movement. Leopold saw it. So did Constance. The Duke spoke before Bertram could. May the cabinet be opened? Lady Voss, who had been pretending not to hover, gave a startled laugh. Opened? My dear Duke, with so many people about. A cabinet is not a coffin, Lady Voss. Its contents may occasionally be approached by the living. Sir Bertram moved forward. I would not advise handling it in this crowd. Nor would I, Constance said. I need not handle it. Only see the underside of the wing more clearly. Leopold turned to her. For the first time that evening, the room seemed to fall away at the edges. May I steady your hand if you lean toward the light? He asked quietly. The question was so simple that its courtesy nearly undid her. He did not assume. He did not take. He asked. Constance looked at his hand, then at his face. Every eye in the room waited to make meaning of the smallest movement. She gave a slight nod. You may, Your Grace. His fingers touched lightly at the outside of her wrist, over the glove, steady enough to support, gentle enough to release at once if she drew back. Constance leaned toward the narrow gap as a footman under Lady Voss's reluctant order opened the cabinet door. The scent of old wood and dust slipped out. Candlelight struck the teapot's wing. There, 2 gold staples, a faint scar where the 3rd had been, and around that absence, glaze that had been disturbed. Constance's pulse quickened, but her voice remained low. It has been altered. Sir Bertram laughed too quickly. Impossible. Not impossible, she said. Difficult, careful, recent enough that the surrounding surface has not settled with the rest. Lady Aurelia's face cooled. Are you accusing someone of tampering with his Grace's property? Constance straightened. Leopold's hand left her wrist at once, as properly as it had come. She felt the loss of steadiness and resented herself for feeling it. I am saying only what I see, and what you see, Sir Bertram said, may be coloured by the wish to appear valuable. The insult was soft. Its cruelty was not. Leopold's expression changed. The charm vanished so completely that several guests looked down at their plates. Sir Bertram, he said, take care. Miss Farleigh has offered an observation. You have offered an injury. Your Grace, I meant no offence. That is often said by men who mean to see whether offence will be permitted. Silence fell. Constance did not look at Leopold, but she felt him beside her, not shielding her from sight, not pushing her behind rank, but standing near enough that the room understood she would not be torn apart for entertainment. Lady Aurelia recovered with a small, shining smile. Then we must all be grateful to Miss Farleigh for her vigilance. How fortunate that your fiancé has such useful eyes. Fortunate indeed, Leopold said. His voice was pleasant again, but not harmless. Constance looked once more at the Peacock Teapot, beautiful beneath the candles, altered beneath the wing. The missing gold staple was only an absence, but absence her mother had taught her, could speak if one knew where to look. Across the cabinet, Sir Bertram bent toward Lady Aurelia and murmured, too low for the room, and not low enough for Constance's sharpened attention. That woman must not be allowed near the teapot again. Constance lowered her gaze before either of them saw she had heard. Beside her, Leopold's hand closed slowly around the head of his walking stick. He had heard it too. The Bond Street repairer kept his shop behind a narrow front window where porcelain shepherdesses cracked tureens, and blue and white plates stood in careful ranks like polite patients awaiting examination. 2 days after the Voss supper, Constance entered beneath a weathered sign that read Pell and Son, China Menders, though the son had gone to sea years ago, and Mr. Pell himself had grown thin enough to seem held together by habit. Matilda Ransom's companion, Mrs. Vale, remained near the door with the fierce propriety of a woman determined that no rumour should be given room to breathe. Leopold stood a little behind Constance, his hat in one hand, his expression mild enough for Bond Street and alert enough for war. It was the first time Constance had been in a workroom with a duke, and the absurdity of it might have amused her if the stakes had not tightened around them since the missing gold staple. The air smelled of dust, warm wax, old glue, and drying paint. It was not a fashionable smell. It was the scent of patience. Her mother had carried it on her cuffs after long afternoons spent restoring what careless hands had spoiled. Constance felt her throat close and opened her reticule before emotion could betray her. The sable brush lay wrapped in linen, exactly where it belonged, and nowhere near where society would approve. "You came," Mr. Pell said, peering at her over round spectacles. His face changed when he saw the Duke. "Miss Farleigh, I didn't know you would bring such company." "Nor did I." 3 days ago, Constance replied. Leopold's mouth moved slightly, but he said nothing. Mr. Pell bowed with an awkwardness that made his apron strings tremble. "Your Grace." "Mr. Pell," Leopold said, "I am told you remember the Carrowmere Peacock." The old repairer's hands stilled upon the counter. "Many craftsmen remember what they never touch, Your Grace. It keeps us humble." "Did you touch it?" Constance asked. "Not the object itself, never, but I saw the repair sketch years ago when your mother was asked to advise on whether the old staples should be polished or left dark. She said they should be left with age in them. She had sense, your mother." The praise entered Constance like warmth she had not expected and could not safely show. She unfolded the linen and set the brush upon the counter. Mr. Pell's gaze dropped to it. His expression softened at once. Mrs. Farleigh's hand was steadier than mine by the end. "She said yours was steadier when truth was required," Constance said. The old man looked away. For a moment the shop grew quiet except for a cart rolling over stones outside and the faint chime of porcelain shifting somewhere on a shelf. Leopold did not fill the silence. Constance noticed that about him. He could command a room, yes, but when silence belonged to another person, he did not always steal it. That restraint made her more conscious of him than speech would have done. "The teapot should have 3 gold staples beneath the wing," she said, "not 2. Mr. Pell reached beneath the counter and drew out a warped leather folio. "It should." He opened the folio with reluctant care and turned several papers before stopping at a page browned at the edges. A small sketch of the Peacock Teapot lay there in dark ink, the wing marked by 3 precise lines. 3 staples. No uncertainty. Constance leaned closer, and her pulse quickened. "This is your copy." "A shop copy." "Never meant for patrons, only for reference in case another repair was requested." Leopold stepped nearer, but kept a proper distance from Constance's shoulder. "And has another repair been requested?" Mr. Pell's mouth tightened. Questions were asked. By whom? The repairer hesitated. Constance understood that hesitation. A craftsman's living depended on the same people who despised the necessity of his work. He could be honest and hungry, or discreet and paid. Many respectable people preferred servants and tradesmen to make moral choices on empty stomachs, so that aristocrats might enjoy clean consciences. "Mr. Pell," she said quietly, "I know what it is to depend on those who can afford to forget you." His eyes returned to hers. She placed one finger lightly beside the brush, not touching his hand, not urging too much. "But I also know my mother trusted you. If someone has altered that teapot, they are counting on everyone useful being too frightened to speak." The old man breathed out. A Voss footman came first. Not in livery, thought I wouldn't know him. He asked whether old gold staples could be lifted without shattering the porcelain. Leopold's gaze sharpened. "When?" "A fortnight ago." Constance felt the fact settle into place. Before Montague House, before the public display, before she had ever been asked to pretend anything, and after that, Sir Bertram Hale sent a note. Asked whether I would examine a lid for colour matching. Said it belonged to a private collector. I refused to put my name to it. "But you saw it," Constance said. "Aye." Mr. Pell touched the sketch. Blue-green glaze, too clean, too bright. Fine work, but not old enough to belong to the Carrowmere body. The words confirmed the unease that had troubled her since the supper. Constance looked at Leopold. He had gone very still, not with surprise alone, she thought, but with anger held so carefully it did not spill. "Your Grace," she said, "the teapot displayed at Voss House may not be wholly original." "No," he replied, "it may be a truth wearing another object's hat." Despite herself, Constance almost smiled. "That is not a technical description. I rely on you for those." He said it simply before Mr. Pell, before Mrs. Vale, before dusty shelves and cracked porcelain, not as flattery, as fact. The words touched some hidden place that praise rarely reached, because they did not pretend her skill was decorative. They needed it. Mr. Pell closed the folio halfway, then stopped. "There is more. The third staple wasn't only removed. It was likely taken to make the old break seem unstable. If the piece failed in public, blame could be laid on whoever last handled it." Constance's hand tightened around the brush handle. "A future duchess asked to pour from it," she said softly. Leopold's eyes moved to her. "You believe that is their intention?" "I believe Lady Aurelia enjoys humiliating people more when there is porcelain to make the sound elegant. And Sir Bertram, I think he wants the world to watch the wrong person blamed while he protects the right lie." Leopold looked to Mr. Pell. "Will you testify to what you have said?" The old man's fear returned. "Your Grace, I have a shop. I have creditors. Sir Bertram knows collectors. One whisper from him, and fine houses will send their broken china elsewhere. Then my house will send enough work to keep yours occupied." "No," Constance said at once. Both men looked at her. Heat rose in her face, but she did not retreat. "Forgive me, Your Grace, but if Mr. Pell speaks after receiving Carrowmere patronage, Sir Bertram will call his truth purchased." Leopold's expression changed, not to offence, but attention. "Then what do you propose?" "That he keep his sketch safe, that he write no statement yet, that when he speaks it be to a fact he can prove, and not to an opinion he can be accused of selling." Mr. Pell's shoulders eased by the smallest degree. Leopold watched Constance for a long moment. "You think several moves ahead. Women with little power must. We are rarely allowed to recover from one mistake." The answer came sharper than she intended. She expected him to answer with rank, or reassurance, or some polished phrase about protection. Instead, he looked down at the old sketch, then at the brush beside her hand. "Carrowmere has survived by making certain no one sees its cracks," he said. "My grandfather called it dignity. My father called it discipline. I am beginning to think it may also be fear." Constance did not know what to do with that honesty. It was not offered to the room. It was not useful. It was simply a seam in him, visible for one breath before he could cover it again. "Fear is not always cowardice," she said. "Sometimes it is memory asking not to be broken twice." His eyes lifted to hers. The shop seemed to narrow around them, all shelves and dust and small damaged things waiting for patient hands. "Is that what repair means to you?" he asked. Constance looked at her mother's brush. "Repair means the break happened. It also means the object was not discarded." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Leopold said, very quietly, "Only fools prefer a perfect fraud to an honest seam." The words settled between them with more force than compliment. Constance had heard men praise beauty, obedience, breeding and charm. She had never heard one defend a crack as if it deserved truth. Her fingers rested on the linen around the brush. His hand remained at his side. The distance between them was proper. The awareness was not small. Mr. Pell cleared his throat and closed the folio. "There is a patroness tea at Voss House in 3 days. I heard talk of it from the footman. They intend to pour from the Peacock." Constance's breath caught. Leopold's face hardened. "Pour from a compromised heirloom in front of witnesses." "If it breaks," Mr. Pell said, "they will say whoever held it mishandled it." Mrs. Vale made a soft sound near the door. Outside, Bond Street continued, as if the world were not arranging the ruin of a woman around a teapot. Constance wrapped the brush again with careful fingers. Its familiar shape steadied her, but not enough to erase the image of Lady Aurelia, smiling while porcelain shattered at her feet. Leopold reached for his hat, then paused. "Miss Farleigh, I will not allow them to place that object in your hands." "Your Grace," she said, "you may not be asked. If you are asked, refuse." She looked at him. "And let them say I feared to touch it, because I had already damaged it." His jaw tightened. He understood. That was the trouble. Understanding did not make the trap gentler. It made it clearer. He inclined his head once. "Then we prepare for the possibility. We prepare for the certainty," Constance said. "Lady Aurelia doesn't invite humiliation and then leave it unused. Mr. Pell slid the sketch toward her, then stopped himself before letting go. "I cannot part with the original." "You should not," Constance said. "It is safer with you until they know it matters." Leopold reached into his coat and withdrew a small card case. "Send word to me if anyone returns, Mr." Pell looked at the card as if it were both shield and danger. "Yes, Your Grace." Constance gathered her reticule. As she turned toward the door, Leopold stepped aside to let her pass first. A courtesy so ordinary, no one else would have marked it. She did. In drawing rooms, men had often moved before her because they did not see her. He moved because he did. At the threshold, she glanced back once at the shelves of repaired porcelain. Some seams had been hidden. Some gleamed faintly where metal held old fractures together. None were whole in the way society worshipped wholeness. Yet they endured. In the carriage back toward Mayfair, with Mrs. Vale seated opposite, and the Duke beside the window at a careful distance. Constance kept her reticule in her lap and her hand over the brush. Leopold looked out at the grey afternoon, then said, "I owe your mother an apology." Constance turned. "You never met her?" "No. But I have spent years in houses full of repaired things without asking whose hands kept them from being thrown away." She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not a saviour, not a stranger forced into false attachment, but a man beginning to question the inherited pride that had made his world so polished and so blind. She would have accepted the apology, Constance said, then corrected your grip on the brush. At last, Leopold laughed softly. It was brief, surprised, and warmer than any smile he had given Lady Aurelia. Constance looked down before he could see how much the sound affected her. The carriage rolled on, carrying them toward a patroness tea, a compromised teapot, and a trap already waiting to be sprung. The Voss patroness tea was arranged for ruin with such elegance that no one could accuse it of cruelty until the cruelty had already done its work. 3 days after the visit to Mr. Pell's shop, Constance entered Lady Voss's drawing-room with the sick certainty of a woman who had seen the crack before the cup was lifted. Nothing in the room admitted danger. The curtains were drawn back to flatter the spring light. Silver trays passed between clusters of ladies in lavender, cream, and pale green. A harp stood near the far wall, though no one touched it. At the center of the room, on a table draped in ivory damask, the Carrowmere Peacock Teapot waited upon a velvet stand. It looked more magnificent than it had at supper. That alone alarmed her. Precious old things did not grow younger between viewings. They only grew more carefully lit. Constance stood beside Matilda Ransom, her reticule hanging from her wrist, her mother's brush wrapped inside it like a private prayer. Leopold had arrived before them and stood near the mantel with Sir Bertram Hale and 2 elderly collectors. He turned the moment Constance entered. Across the room, through fans and feathers and deliberate chatter, his eyes found hers, not possessively, not theatrically, simply with the full attention that had begun to unsettle her more than neglect ever had. Lady Aurelia Voss saw the look and smiled. Miss Farleigh, she called, every syllable polished for witnesses. How fortunate, we were just saying, that no one admires repaired porcelain with quite your devotion. Then I am glad to arrive before admiration becomes careless, Constance replied. The dowager's fan paused in approval. Leopold left the mantel and came toward her, not quickly enough to feed gossip, but not slowly enough to suggest doubt. Miss Farleigh, he said, you are well? The question was ordinary. His voice was not. It held the memory of Bond Street, of honest seams, of a carriage confession offered to her mother's ghost. Quite well, Your Grace. Good, he lowered his voice. The lid is wrong, her breath caught. You noticed. I noticed you looking at it as if it had committed a crime and hoped to be thought beautiful. Despite the danger, a flicker of amusement touched her. That is not a technical description. I rely on you for those. She should not have been warmed by words spoken in a room designed to humiliate her, yet there it was again, that impossible steadiness between them. Not romance, not yet. A fragile confidence, offered in public where confidence could cost him something. Lady Aurelia glided nearer. How charming to see such serious consultation before tea. One might think His Grace's household could not pour without Miss Farleigh's approval. One might, Leopold said mildly, if one had exhausted better thoughts. A few ladies lowered their eyes to hide smiles. Aurelia's own smile brightened into something sharper. Then let us begin before thought becomes too strenuous. Lady Voss clapped lightly, and a footman stepped forward. Since dear Miss Farleigh has taken such an interest in the Carrowmere Peacock, it seems only fitting that she should do the honor of pouring the first cup as future Duchess. The room stilled. There it was. No scream, no accusation. Only a silver invitation laid over a pit. Constance looked at the teapot. The blue-green glaze beneath the wing shone too cleanly. The lid sat with a fraction too much pride, its rim not quite married to the body. The handle, shaped like a sweep of tail feathers, showed an old repair line broken by absence, two visible gold staples. A dull ghost where the third should have been. If she refused, they would say she feared the heirloom because she had meddled with it. If she accepted and it failed, the sound would condemn her before any explanation could rise. Leopold's face changed. He understood the trap at the same instant she did. "Lady Voss," he said, "there is no need for Miss Farleigh to perform household service for your amusement." Lady Aurelia widened her eyes. "Service? Your grace wounds us. We meant it as honor." Sir Bertram stepped forward with an air of reasonable concern. "Surely, if Miss Farleigh is to join the Carrowmere family, no one is better placed to handle its treasures." "How generous," Constance said softly. Her voice sounded calm from far away. Matilda touched her sleeve. "You need not." Constance looked at the dowager, then at Leopold. He was watching her with attention he could not fully hide. In his eyes, she saw warning, anger, and something like fear. He would stop it if she asked. Perhaps he would overturn the whole tea, offend Lady Voss, insult Sir Bertram, and carry the scandal on his own name. But if he did, her name would remain unproven, protected, hidden, useful only in private. She stepped forward. "I will pour." Leopold moved once barely, as if every instinct in him had rejected the decision. Then he stopped. He had promised to tell her of danger, not decide for her. She saw the cost of his restraint in the tightness of his hand around his watch chain. Lady Aurelia's smile softened into victory. The footman lifted the teapot with both hands and brought it to the tea table. Constance saw his nervousness. He knew something was wrong, or had been told enough to fear blame. "Set it down," she said gently. "Do not tilt it yet." The young man obeyed. Sir Bertram gave a faint laugh. "Miss Farleigh instructs the servants now." "No," Constance said. "I protect them from being blamed for their betters' arrangements." A small shock went through the room. Lady Voss inhaled. Leopold's gaze sharpened with something fierce and proud, but Sir Bertram spoke over the moment. "The water cools." Constance placed her gloved hand near the lid, but did not touch it at once. The porcelain seemed to wait. She leaned closer. The lid did not sit true. Someone had altered the inner rim so that movement would make it slip. She could see it now. If she lifted the pot and poured in the ordinary fashion, the weight would shift. The lid would fall. The weakened repair would take the shock. "This lid should be removed before pouring," she said. Sir Bertram's smile vanished and returned. "Nonsense. It was made to pour as it stands. This lid was not made for this body." The words entered the room like a dropped knife. Lady Aurelia laughed too brightly. "What an extraordinary claim. Are we to believe you can see such things at a glance?" "No," Constance said. "You are to believe I can see them after looking." Sir Bertram's voice hardened beneath its polish. Or perhaps Miss Farleigh creates uncertainty where none exists, so that any damage may later be called inevitable. Leopold stepped toward him. "Take care." 2 words. Low, ducal, enough to chill the nearest listeners, but not enough to stop the trap already in motion. Lady Aurelia reached forward with graceful impatience. "Then allow me to help." Her fingers brushed the lid before Constance could prevent it. The porcelain shifted. Constance caught the knob to keep it from falling, but the altered rim skidded beneath her glove. The lid struck the teapot's shoulder with a thin, terrible crack. The sound was not loud. It did not need to be. Every conversation died. A jagged line leapt beneath the peacock's wing. The body lurched against the silver tray. Constance steadied it, but a curved section split free and dropped, breaking into bright pieces among the teaspoons. For one heartbeat no one moved. Then Lady Aurelia cried out, "Miss Farleigh!" Her hand flew to her mouth with perfect horror. "What have you done?" Constance stared at the shards. The old break line had opened exactly where the third staple should have held it. There, among blue-green fragments and gold-edged dust, was the dull, empty scar of removal, proof and accusation in the same breath. Sir Bertram seized the moment with brutal softness. No one touched the pieces. It may be important to determine whether prior handling weakened the object. Prior handling. The words turned every eye toward Constance. Lady Voss whispered, "The Duke's heirloom." Another lady murmured, "She was examining it so closely at supper." Someone else said, "Perhaps she meant to hide a mistake." Constance stood very still. Her hand remained above the tray, empty now. She looked to Leopold. She did not want rescue. Not exactly. She wanted the one thing more difficult. Trust before proof. He looked at the shattered porcelain, at the scandal blooming around his family name, at Sir Bertram's grave expression, at Lady Aurelia's beautiful false distress. Then his gaze came to Constance. Only a second passed, perhaps less, but in that second hesitation crossed his face. Not condemnation, not belief in her guilt, only the old Carrowmere fear Mr. Pell's shop had revealed, the terror of a priceless crack becoming public. Constance saw it. Worse, Lady Aurelia saw Constance see it. The room did not need more. That one breath of uncertainty did what open accusation could not. It broke the delicate thing that had begun to form between them. Constance lowered her hand. Leopold reached toward her, stopping just short of her sleeve. "Miss Farleigh." She stepped back, not far, only enough. His hand fell at once, respecting the refusal, and the pain of that respect nearly undid her. She curtsied to Lady Voss first, then to Matilda, then finally to the Duke. Her voice, when it came, was clear enough to silence even the whispers. "Then I release his grace from every performance attached to my name." Matilda went pale. Leopold's face changed. Constance. It was the first time he had spoken her Christian name. The room heard it. So did she. For one dangerous instant, she wanted to let it hold her there, but dignity, once chosen, could not be postponed until it felt convenient. "Your Grace," she said, and the title placed the distance back between them. "I will not let a false honor become a true disgrace." Lady Aurelia's eyes shone. Sir Bertram looked solemn. The guests parted as Constance turned toward the door, not out of kindness, but because scandal required a clear path for its victim to leave beautifully. Her reticule struck softly against her wrist. Inside, her mother's brush remained wrapped and whole. Behind her, porcelains lay broken on silver. Before her, the hall seemed longer than it had any right to be. She did not hurry. She did not weep. She did not look back. Only when the drawing-room door closed behind her did she allow herself one breath that hurt. Inside the room, Leopold remained motionless beside the shattered peacock. Lady Aurelia began to speak, but he raised one hand, and the authority in that small gesture silenced her. He looked down at the tray. Among the fragments lay no third gold staple, only the mark where it had been, and a dusting of blue-green powder too bright for age. His gaze moved slowly from the shards to the glove. Lady Aurelia had dropped near the chair she had abandoned in her performance of distress. Along one seam of the pale kid leather, caught where a lady would never think to look, clung the same unnatural dust. Leopold bent and picked it up with his handkerchief. The room watched him now with new unease. "Your Grace," Sir Bertram said, Leopold folded the glove carefully into the linen, his face unreadable. "No one leaves with a fragment of my property," he said. "Not porcelain, not truth, not Miss Farleigh's name." By the following morning, London had already improved the scandal beyond recognition. In one version, Constance Farleigh had shattered the Carrowmere heirloom in a fit of jealous agitation. In another, she had been attempting to conceal a clumsy repair of her own. By the most imaginative account, she had been seen whispering over the teapot moments before its fall, as if porcelain could be ruined by ambition alone. Constance heard none of these versions from callers, for no callers came. She heard them from the silence of the hallway outside her father's modest lodging, from the maid's careful avoidance of her eyes, from the way her father folded the newspaper before she entered the breakfast room and pretended he had not been reading. Mr. Farleigh had aged overnight. His coat hung loosely at the shoulders, and his smile tried to be paternal while failing to hide fear. "My dear," he said, "perhaps it would be wise to remain at home for a few days, until the matter fades." Matters did not fade when women without fortune were attached to them. They hardened, they became shape, label, verdict. Constance looked at the small table where her mother had once kept household accounts with painful neatness. "It will not fade, Papa. It will be polished by everyone who enjoys seeing it shine." He flinched. She regretted the sharpness at once, but not the truth. Her reticule lay beside her untouched tea. Inside it, the sable brush remained wrapped in linen. She had taken it out twice before dawn, not to use it, only to feel the handle and remember hands steadier than her own. Her mother had taught her how to mend porcelain by first teaching her not to lie about the crack. Clean the break, study the edges, do not force what no longer fits. Constance wondered whether the same rule applied to trust. The Duke's hesitation had lasted less than a breath. It had been enough. A knock sounded below, not the hurried knock of a tradesman, not the uncertain tap of a neighbor. A formal knock, measured and impossible to mistake. Mr. Farleigh looked toward the door with visible alarm. "Were you expecting anyone?" "No." The maid entered moments later, pale with suppressed excitement. "The Dowager Duchess of Carrowmere, Miss Farleigh. His Grace is with her." And Mrs. Vale. Mr. Farleigh rose too quickly and nearly upset his chair. Constance remained still. For one treacherous instant, her heart moved before her judgment could restrain it. Then she remembered the room at Voss House, the shards on silver, the hand reaching toward her too late. "Show them into the front parlor," she said, "and leave the door ajar until Mrs. Vale is seated." The maid blinked, then curtsied. Mr. Farleigh whispered, "Constance, a duke in this house." "Yes," she said, picking up her reticule. "Let us hope the walls survive the distinction." The front parlor had never looked smaller than it did with Leopold Ransom standing in it. He had not brought grandeur with him exactly. He brought awareness. The faded carpet, the mended curtain, the narrow mantel with its cracked clock, all seemed suddenly visible in cruel light. Matilda Ransom sat beside Mrs. Vale with her spine straight and her eyes less sharp than usual. The Duke stood until Constance entered, then bowed, not deeply enough to perform remorse for spectators, precisely enough to honor her before her own father. "Miss Farleigh," she curtsied. "Your Grace." The titles stood between them like two locked doors. His gaze moved across her face, not searching for tears which she would not have forgiven, but for permission to speak. "I ask to call because I owe you an apology that should not be delivered by note." Mr. Farleigh looked startled. Matilda lowered her eyes. Constance remained near the chair, farthest from him. You owe me nothing more than the public correction agreed upon. I owe you that as well. But first I owe you the truth of what I did." His hands were empty except for a folded white handkerchief. He placed it on the small table between them and opened it. Inside lay Lady Aurelia's pale glove, turned slightly to show the seam where blue-green dust had caught like colored ash. Constance's breath stopped, but she did not touch it. "I found this after you left," Leopold said, near the chair Lady Aurelia had occupied before she placed herself beside the tea table. The dust caught in the seam resembles the disturbed glaze near the teapot's wing. Mr. Farleigh made a faint sound. "Then my daughter did not." "No," Leopold said, with such immediate force that the little room seemed to brace around it. He turned back to Constance. "But I did not say that quickly enough yesterday." Silence followed. This was the break, not the porcelain. This, the place where he might paste over harm with evidence and expect gratitude to hide the seam. Constance folded her hands around her reticule. "You had reason to be shocked. I had reason to be angry. I had reason to look at the teapot. I had no right to let family pride stand where trust should have stood." The words were plain. No excuse dressed itself as explanation. He did not blame the room, the pressure, or her decision to pour. He took the fault and held it where she could see its shape. "I wronged you," he said, "not by failing to know everything. By allowing you to stand alone for even 1 second while they made your name the easiest object to break." The quiet after that was different. Constance felt it move through her father, through Mrs. Vale, even through the dowager, whose face had become very still. She had imagined anger from the Duke. She had prepared for defense strategy, perhaps a command disguised as care. She had not prepared for apology. True apology was more dangerous. It asked what she would do with the part of herself that wanted to believe him. "I do not know whether I forgive you," she said. "I didn't come to demand it." His answer came at once. "I came to ask what you need." The question nearly undid her. She lowered her gaze to the glove. "Access, witnesses, the truth of who handled the lid before I did. Mr. Pell's sketch, if he can be persuaded to produce it when needed. And no more protection that removes my voice." Leopold inclined his head. "Agreed. You answer too quickly. I have been told I command too quickly. I am attempting variety." Despite herself, the corner of her mouth almost lifted. She reached into her reticule and withdrew the linen-wrapped brush. Her father looked at it with sudden softness. "Your mother's?" "Yes." Constance unwrapped it and laid it beside the glove, careful that neither touched the other. The brush's sable tip was clean, but a faint old dust remained in the ferrule where years of work had settled beyond washing. "This dust is older," she said, "duller. See how it lies grey beneath the brown? The dust in Lady Aurelia's glove is brighter, almost blue. It came from a newer glaze disturbance, not from my brush or any ordinary examination I made." Leopold leaned closer, then stopped before shadowing her light. The restraint was small, she noticed. "May I?" he asked, indicating not the brush, but the space near it. Yes, he braced one hand on the table edge, far enough from hers. Together they looked at the 2 traces of dust, old patience, beside fresh deceit. Constance placed her fingertips on the linen near the brush. "My mother used to say that new damage always tries to dress itself as old damage. It rarely has the patience. Your mother was formidable." "She was tired," Constance said, "and kind. Those are often mistaken for lesser things." Leopold's expression softened, and this time he did not hide it behind wit. "Then I am sorry to have learned her wisdom only after failing her daughter." The room seemed too small for breath. Constance looked down. His hand rested near the linen, not touching hers, waiting, though perhaps he did not know what for. She could have withdrawn. She could have gathered the brush and returned it to the safety of her reticule. Instead, slowly, she turned her palm upward beside the brush case. It was not surrender, it was permission. Leopold looked at her hand before he moved. "Are you certain?" he asked quietly. "For a moment," she said. "Not for a promise, then only for a moment." His fingers closed around hers with careful warmth. No pressure, no claim, just a human steadiness offered across a table, crowded with evidence, apology, and the fragile beginning of repaired trust. Constance let the contact remain for 3 breaths, then she withdrew, and he released her at once. Her father looked away with suspicious interest in the mantel clock. Matilda's eyes shone, though her voice, when she spoke, was brisk. "Now that everyone has behaved with unexpected sense, we must consider Sir Bertram." As if summoned by his name, a messenger arrived within the quarter hour, carrying a note from Bond Street. Leopold broke the seal and read it, his expression darkening with each line. "Mr. Pell has written. Someone came to him before dawn and offered money if he would deny that the 3rd stable ever existed." Constance folded the brush back into its linen. The warmth of the Duke's hand had faded from her skin, but not from memory. "Then Mr. Pell is frightened." "Yes, and useful." Leopold looked at her. "To them, to the truth," she said, rising. "If we reach him before fear teaches him silence." Matilda stood at once. "Mrs. Vale and I will accompany you. No one shall say, 'Miss Farleigh visited a tradesman alone with a duke.'" Leopold slipped Aurelia's glove back into the handkerchief. "And no one shall say she needed to." Constance met his eyes. The apology had not erased the crack between them. Would. But for the first time since the teapot shattered, she believed the break might not be the end of the object. It might be the place where truth began to show. By the time Constance reached Bond Street again, she understood that fear could alter a man's face as surely as fire altered glaze. Mr. Pell's shop looked unchanged from the street. The same cracked shepherdesses stood in the window. The same blue and white plates leaned in careful rows. The same painted sign swung above the door, creaking faintly whenever a carriage passed. Yet inside, the air had changed. The warmth of drying paste and old porcelain remained. But beneath it lay the sour stillness of a room where someone had been threatened and had spent the morning imagining hunger. Mr. Pell stood behind the counter, with his spectacles low on his nose, twisting a rag between both hands. When he saw Constance, his relief came first. Then his terror remembered the Duke behind her and fled nowhere. Mrs. Vale took her position near the door at once, as proper and immovable as a chapel monument. Matilda Ransom remained beside a shelf of repaired cups, her fan closed, her gaze sharp enough to cut string. Leopold entered last, not crowding the room, not filling it with command, but making it impossible for any invisible threat to pretend it had no opponent. "Mr. Pell," Constance said before the Duke could speak, "you sent word that someone came to you." The old repairer swallowed. "I shouldn't have sent it. It was foolish. A man must live." "Yes," she said, "that is why you sent it." His eyes flicked to Leopold. "Your Grace, I meant no disrespect to your house. I never touched the Carrowmere piece. I never took coin to damage it. I only—" "We did not come to accuse you," Leopold said. His voice was even. "We came because someone else means to make you afraid enough to accuse yourself." Mr. Pell gripped the rag harder. Sir Bertram Hale's man came before dawn. Not the Voss footman this time, a harder fellow. He said memory was unreliable in old tradesmen. He said If I were asked about the third staple, I should say there had never been one. 2 staples only. Always 2. He placed money on the counter. "Did you take it?" Matilda asked. Mr. Pell's face reddened with humiliation. "No, Your Grace." Then his voice broke into something smaller, but I looked at it long enough to hate myself. Constance stepped nearer the counter. The old instinct in her was to lower her voice, as her mother had done with frightened clients who had brought in shattered wedding china and pretended not to care. Looking is not taking. A gentleman like Sir Bertram can end a shop without lifting a hammer. Then we must make it harder for him to do so quietly. Mr. Pell shook his head. "You speak as if truth pays rent." "No," Constance said. "Truth often arrives late and badly dressed, but lies tend to bring worse landlords." The old man gave a weak laugh despite himself. Leopold's gaze moved to her with that still, attentive warmth she had begun to fear and trust in equal measure. No touch passed between them. None was needed. In that crowded little shop, his silence made room for her method, and she understood the gift of it. He could have used his title like a mallet. Instead, he let her use memory like a key. "My mother helped you once," she said. Mr. Pell's face changed. "After the kiln fire. She came home with burns on her cuff and would not tell my father because she knew he would call repair work beneath her. But she said Mr. Pell had lost more than plates that day. He had lost confidence." The old man looked down. "She stayed until midnight sorting what could be saved. Wouldn't let me throw away a Worcester dish with a split clean through the center. Said a clean break was not a death sentence." Constance unwrapped the sable brush and laid it on the counter between them. "Then believe what she believed. A break can tell the truth of how it happened." Mr. Pell stared at the brush. His fingers stopped twisting the rag. At last, with the defeated tenderness of a man opening a wound to let out poison, he crouched and drew a narrow wooden box from beneath the counter. From that box came a folded paper tied with faded thread. "I kept the shop sketch," he said. "Not the copy I showed you before. The original working sketch made when Mrs. Farleigh advised on the old repair. It marks the third staple's placement and the angle of the wing fracture. I kept it because she corrected my first notation. He placed it before Constance, not Leopold. That mattered. The paper smelled of dust and gum. 3 gold staples had been drawn beneath the peacock's wing, each marked with a tiny cross where metal entered porcelain. Beside the third, in a smaller hand Constance knew at once, were the words, "Leave age visible, do not over-polish." Her mother's hand. For one moment the shop blurred. Constance did not cry. She had learned too early that tears were taken as proof of weakness when offered by women without power. But the ache moved through her like light through cracked glaze. Leopold saw it and did not speak. His restraint held the moment safe. "This proves the third staple existed," Constance said, "and that its absence now is alteration, not age. There is more." Mr. Pell opened another drawer and removed a small, wrapped bundle. Inside lay a porcelain lid, not the one from the shattered teapot, but a study piece, a trial of blue-green glaze painted upon a shallow curve. "The Voss footman brought me this to compare. Said it belonged to a private collector who wished to match an old Chinese color. The color is too bright, as you said. Fine, but young. Sir Bertram wanted to know whether candlelight would flatter it." Leopold's voice became very quiet. "He commissioned a false lid, or advised someone who did. I cannot swear more than I saw." "Then you shall not swear more than you saw," Constance said. "That is enough." Leopold turned to her. "We could secure the sketch now and present it through my solicitor. Quietly." She met his gaze. The word quietly had a polished sound, but she heard the danger under it. Quietly meant safely for Carrowmere. Quietly meant no further spectacle. Quietly meant Lady Aurelia might be cut from invitation lists by whispers, while Constance remained the poor repairer who had once stood near a broken teapot and was never quite cleared. "No," she said. The Duke's expression did not harden, but it steadied. "No, if this is settled quietly, my name will remain useful and stained. Sir Bertram will say your rank smothered doubt. Lady Aurelia will sigh beautifully in corners. Mr. Pell will be called purchased. My father will be mentioned wherever people wish to make poverty sound like motive. And if we expose it publicly, Bertram will strike back. He already has." "Mr." Pell whispered. "He said there would be a demonstration at the Royal Academy. Patrons, collectors, ladies of taste. Lady Aurelia is to be present. Sir Bertram will explain the damage as the result of ignorant handling." Matilda's eyes narrowed. Ignorant handling being Miss Farleigh. "Yes, Your Grace." Leopold looked at Constance then, and she saw the battle in him. He wished to close doors, command carriages, place footmen, and rank between her and every sharp tongue in London. The impulse was not cruel. That was what made it difficult. It came dressed as care. "Miss Farleigh," he said, "a public demonstration gives them a stage. Then we must not leave them the only script. You understand what they will say." "I understood it yesterday while leaving Lady Voss's drawing room." His jaw tightened, not in anger at her, but at the memory. "I remember. So do I." The words were quiet. They carried the breath of the crack still between them. He accepted it without flinching. "Then tell me what standing beside you requires now." Constance looked at the sketch, the glazed trial, the frightened repairer, the brush her mother had held, and the Duke who had begun to learn the difference between rescue and respect. Mr. Pell must keep the original sketch until the demonstration. Unless danger to it becomes immediate, a copy may go to your solicitor, witnessed and dated today. The glazed trial should be wrapped and sealed by Mr. Pell himself. Mrs. Vale and her Grace can witness that it has not passed through my hands alone. And if Sir Bertram calls me ignorant, I will answer him with the repair marks." Mr. Pell stared at her. "Before all those people?" "Yes, they will not like it." Constance allowed herself the faintest smile. Truth rarely waits to be liked before it enters. Leopold's mouth softened, but he did not smile fully. "You have a talent for making courage sound like housekeeping." "For women it often is." Matilda gave a small, approving nod. "Then we shall keep house with some vigor." They set to work. Mr. Pell copied the sketch with shaking care, while Mrs. Vale witnessed each line. Matilda sealed the glaze trial in paper and wax. Leopold wrote to his solicitor from Mr. Pell's cramped desk, his handwriting swift and controlled. Constance lifted her brush to wrap it again, but in the bustle it slipped from the linen and rolled toward the edge of the counter. Leopold caught it before it fell. He did not hold it longer than necessary. He placed it across the folded linen, handle toward her, as reverently as if returning a jewel. Their eyes met over the small, worn thing. No one else seemed to notice. Yet the moment entered her with startling force. He understood, perhaps not fully, but enough to know that the brush was not a tool alone. It was memory. It was steadiness. It was the hand of a woman society had never thanked. "Your mother's work will not be used to shame you," he said softly. Constance closed her fingers around the brush. "Then do not make it your defense of me. Let it be my evidence." He inclined his head. "As you wish." Outside, a carriage stopped abruptly before the shop. All four turned toward the window. Through the narrow glass, Constance saw a liveried Voss footman step down and hesitate when he recognized the Duke's carriage waiting nearby. He did not enter. He turned back, climbed up, and the carriage moved away too fast for casual business. Mr. Pell went pale. Leopold crossed to the window. "They know we came." Constance tied the brush into its linen, the knot held firm beneath her fingers. "Then Sir Bertram will hurry." Matilda's fan snapped open. "Let him." Men who hurry often break what they meant only to hide. Constance looked once at the original sketch in Mr. Pell's hand, then at Leopold. He did not offer comfort. He offered attention, and that was steadier. The public trap had a date now. The Royal Academy would become a room full of witnesses, porcelain, rank, and accusation, for the first time since the Peacock shattered. Constance did not dread the sound of breaking. She had begun to understand that some things had to crack loudly before anyone admitted they had been false. The threat arrived at Carrowmere House, folded into a square of expensive paper, and sealed with no crest at all, which made it more insulting than if Sir Bertram Hale had stamped his name across the wax. Leopold read it in the library shortly after noon, while rain tapped softly against the windows and the evidence from Mr. Pell's shop lay arranged upon the long table with almost military neatness. The copied sketch was there, witnessed and dated. The sealed glazed trial was there. The note from Mr. Pell describing the Voss footman's visit was there. Lady Aurelia's glove, wrapped in Leopold's handkerchief, rested apart from the rest, as if even evidence could be offended by proximity. Constance stood on the other side of the table with Matilda Ransom and Mrs. Vale. Her mother's mending brush safe in its linen case beside her reticule. She watched the Duke's expression change as he read. Not much. A narrowing of the eyes, a stillness around the mouth. The pleasant social mask vanished, and beneath it appeared the man whose family had survived generations by making danger feel the full weight of his name. "What is it?" Matilda asked. Leopold did not answer at once. That delay was warning enough. Constance felt her fingers close around the back of a chair. "Your Grace," she said, "if the note concerns me, I would prefer not to be protected from the words." His gaze lifted to hers. Something in it tightened. "It concerns your father." The room seemed to lose air. Mr. Farleigh, who had not been invited to Carrowmere House because Constance had wished to spare him further humiliation, appeared suddenly present in every silence. His anxious hands, his folded newspaper, his weak attempts to smile as though poverty had not made him easier to threaten. "Read it," Constance said. Leopold's jaw set. "Miss Farleigh, read it." Matilda's fan stilled. Mrs. Vale looked down at her gloves. The Duke glanced once at the paper, then spoke in a voice held carefully level. "If Miss Farleigh appears at the Royal Academy demonstration, certain questions will be raised regarding Mr. Farleigh's access to private houses, his daughter's trade in repairs, and whether introductions to vulnerable households have been exchanged for consideration. His Grace may preserve all parties from ugliness by withdrawing Miss Farleigh from public involvement and allowing recognized experts to settle the matter." No one moved. The clock on the mantel counted 3 heartbeats too loudly. Constance heard the shape of the threat before she understood the pain of it. They would not merely call her ignorant now. They would make her useful work sound like a door through which her father had crept into aristocratic homes for profit. They would make poverty predatory. They would turn every cracked cup she had ever mended into evidence that she had been entering rooms where she did not belong. "Recognized experts," Matilda said with cold contempt. Sir Bertram's phrase, if ever I heard one. Leopold set the note down. He means to strike at your father because your own conduct has given him too little. Constance looked at the evidence on the table. Every piece had seemed so strong an hour ago. Now each one felt fragile beside reputation. Can he do it? He can imply it, Leopold said, which in some rooms is more efficient than proof. And what do you intend? He did not answer quickly enough. That was when fear entered her. Not fear of Sir Bertram. Fear of the old pattern returning in a better coat. Leopold walked to the window, the unsigned letter still in his hand. You will not attend tomorrow. Matilda's head turned sharply. Leopold. No. His voice remained controlled, but it had hardened. I can have my solicitor present the sketch. Mr. Pell can testify if necessary. I can force Lady Voss to surrender the remaining fragments. I can make it known that Carrowmere considers the matter closed. Closed? Constance repeated. He turned back, contained. That is not the same thing. It is safer. For whom? The question struck him. She saw it. She also saw him resist the answer. For you, he said. For your father. For your name. A quiet anger rose in her, clearer and steadier than tears. My name has already been spoken in rooms where I was not present to answer. You would now make that absence permanent and call it safety. I would prevent further injury by removing the injured person from sight, by refusing to let them use you again. They are using me whether I attend or not. If I stay away, Sir Bertram will say I feared examination. Lady Aurelia will lower her eyes and let everyone imagine guilt. My father will become a whisper attached to every mended cup in London. Leopold's control flickered. And if you go, they will tear at you before collectors, patronesses, and half the people whose opinion can wound your future. Then let me keep my own future in my hands. I am trying to spare you. No, she said, and the word landed harder than she intended. You are trying to put me where the damage cannot be seen. Silence followed. Leopold's face went still in a different way. Not anger now, recognition perhaps, but not yet acceptance. Constance reached into her reticule. She drew out the temporary engagement ring he had provided the morning after the arrangement was formed. A modest Carrowmere family ring, chosen not for sentiment, but for credibility. She had worn it because the role required it. Its weight had never felt heavier than now. She placed it on the library table between the glove and the sketch. The sound was small. It carried through the room like a crack. I will not be hidden for my own good, she said. Not by Lady Aurelia's cruelty, not by Sir Bertram's lies, not by your protection. Leopold stared at the ring. Matilda closed her eyes briefly, as if the words had struck something old in the family walls. The Duke's voice, when it came, was quieter. You think I am no better than they are? No. Her answer was immediate, and that hurt more than accusation would have. I think you are better. That is why this wounds. His gaze rose to hers. The anger had left him now, and without it he looked almost tired. Younger, somehow, not in years, but in the exposed place behind rank. When the teapot broke, he said, I saw my grandfather's house, my father's portrait, every Carrowmere dinner table, where I was taught that a crack in public becomes a family history if one does not cover it at once. Then I saw your face, and I knew I had chosen the wrong fear. I told myself I would not do so again. He looked at the ring, and here I am, attempting to cover the crack more gently. Constance did not soften her posture, though something inside her did. Gentleness does not change the shape of a cage. No, he said, it doesn't. He crossed to the table and picked up the folded notice he had written earlier. Constance had not noticed it until then. It lay beside the solicitor's papers, already drafted in his firm hand, prepared to announce that Miss Farleigh would not be required to appear, because His Grace had assumed responsibility for all further inquiry. Her stomach tightened. He had not merely thought of excluding her. He had begun. Leopold held the paper over the table for a moment. Then he tore it once, twice, again, until the neat announcement became useless pieces in his hand. No one spoke. He placed the torn fragments beside the ring, not as spectacle, but as confession. "Tell me what standing beside you looks like," he said. The question was stripped of wit, stripped of command. It reached her more deeply because it cost him visible effort. Constance looked at the torn notice, then at the ring. "It looks like letting me speak before you defend me, even if they insult you, especially then. It looks like allowing Sir Bertram to set his trap. It looks like letting him believe he has. And if I see the room turn, you may stand, you may insist I be heard, you may contradict a lie with fact, but you may not turn me into a porcelain figure placed safely behind glass." Leopold gave a faint breath, almost a laugh, but there was no amusement in it. "You choose sharp metaphors, Miss Farleigh." "I have been given sharp materials, Your Grace." Matilda rose and crossed to the table. She picked up the ring and held it out to Leopold. "Do not place it back on her hand," she said. "Not until she gives you leave." "I know," he said. Constance believed he did. That was new. Leopold accepted the ring, then turned to her. He did not step close. He did not soften the moment with touch. The absence of it mattered. Comfort before respect would have been another form of taking. "May I keep this until tomorrow?" he asked, not as a claim, as a reminder. Of what? That a promise taken for appearance is worth less than a choice returned freely. Constance held his gaze. "Yes," she said at last. "You may keep it. You may not use it." "I won't." In the pause that followed, rain slid down the library window in clear lines. Mrs. Vale exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for several minutes. Matilda looked from one to the other with an expression more complicated than triumph. "Then tomorrow," the Dowager said, "we attend the Royal Academy." "Tomorrow," Constance said. "I answer, Sir Bertram myself." Leopold folded the ring into his waistcoat pocket with the care of a man putting away something fragile that did not belong to him. "And I," he said, "will remember to stand beside you before I remember to stand in front." Constance felt the words enter the space where trust had cracked. They did not mend it. Not yet, but they cleaned the break. They made repair possible. She gathered her mother's brush and the copied sketch. Her hands were steady now, not because she was unafraid, but because fear had finally been given a task. When she reached the library door, she turned back once. "Your Grace, yes, tomorrow. If the room grows cruel, don't mistake my silence for defeat. Sometimes I am only choosing where to place the first word." Leopold bowed his head, and this time the gesture contained no performance at all. "Then I will wait for it." By late afternoon, Carrowmere House had ceased to resemble a ducal residence and had become, in Constance's private opinion, the most elegant evidence room in London. The library table held the copied repair sketch from Mr. Pell, the sealed glazed trial, wrapped in paper and marked with Matilda Ransom's wax, the written account of the Voss footman's visit, Lady Aurelia's pale glove with blue-green dust still caught in its seam, and the fragments of the shattered Peacock Teapot, arranged upon velvet like pieces of a fallen argument. The false lid had been placed in a locked drawer after a junior footman from Voss House, pale and shaking, had slipped it to one of Leopold's servants with a whispered confession that he had been ordered to remove it from the broken set and say nothing. That confession had not yet been written. It lived only in the boy's fear, in Mrs. Vale's memory, and in the locked drawer where the lid waited for the Royal Academy demonstration on the morrow. Constance stood at the table with her mother's brush in its linen case near her right hand. She had not opened it again. There was no need. Its presence was enough. Matilda sat at the writing desk, making a list of those who must be present. Lady Montague, 2 patronesses, Mr. Pell, the junior footman, if he could be brought safely, Leopold's solicitor, and at least 1 collector whose reputation did not depend upon Sir Bertram Hale. Leopold stood across from Constance, reading Mr. Pell's copied sketch for the 5th time, though she suspected he had memorized it already. "You are frowning at the 3rd staple as though it owes you rent," she said. His eyes lifted. Some of the strain left his face. "It owes me an apology, preferably a public one. Metal seldom apologizes. Then tomorrow I shall begin with Sir Bertram." Matilda did not look up. "You will begin by remembering that Miss Farleigh speaks first." "I remember." His answer was quiet, and it reached Constance more surely than if he had sworn it. Since tearing up the protective notice, he had not once tried to take the matter from her hands. When a servant brought news, he handed it to Constance before commenting. When his solicitor asked whether His Grace would present the evidence, Leopold said, "Miss Farleigh will determine the order." Each courtesy was small. Each one repaired a little more of what his hesitation had broken. Yet repair was not the same as forgetting. Constance still remembered the shattered teapot, the room's hunger, the second in which family pride had crossed his face before trust could reach it. The memory remained, clean-edged and honest. She did not wish it erased. Erasure made objects false. "Mr. Pell must not be made to say more than he saw," she said. "If Sir Bertram presses him on intention, he may falter." "Then we keep him to fact," Leopold said. "The sketch, the 3 staples, the Voss inquiry, the trial glaze." "And the footman?" Matilda asked. "If he is too frightened, we do not force him." Constance answered before Leopold could. "A frightened witness made reckless is useful only to a liar. We need truth, not panic." Leopold looked at her then with an expression so open it unsettled the room more than anger would have done. "Your mother taught you porcelain," he said. "Who taught you people?" Constance looked down at the shards. "Porcelain is easier. People pretend not to be broken." Matilda's pen stopped. A silence settled, not awkward, but weighted. Then the dowager rose and came to the table. For once, there was no fan in her hand, no social weapon between herself and the woman she had placed in danger. "Miss Farleigh," she said, "I owe you more than strategy." Constance turned to her. "Your Grace?" Matilda's lips pressed together. "At Montague House, I chose you because you were composed, overlooked, and useful to my son's immediate difficulty. I told myself I had chosen well. I had, but I had also chosen selfishly." Leopold's face tightened. "Mother, no, Leopold. Let me at least have the dignity of admitting when I have behaved like half the women I despise." She looked back at Constance. "I saw your courage and made use of it before I asked what it would cost you. I am sorry." The apology was not as startling as Leopold's had been, but it struck a different place. Matilda Ransom was a woman of rank, widowed power, and practiced command. She had likely survived by rarely admitting error aloud. Constance could have accepted too quickly. Women like her were trained to make forgiveness convenient for those above them. She did not. "I understand why you did it," she said. "That is not the same as being unharmed by it." Matilda bowed her head once. "No, If tomorrow clears my name, I do not want private regret afterward. I want public truth. You shall have it, not because I am pitiable. No, Matilda said, because you are owed it. Constance believed her, not fully perhaps, but enough. A sound at the door interrupted them. A footman entered with a tray of newly arrived correspondence. Leopold went through it quickly, then paused over one card printed in a bold, fashionable hand. Lady Aurelia has announced tomorrow's demonstration more widely than expected. Matilda took the card and read, her mouth tightening. Patronesses, collectors, amateur connoisseurs, and friends of the Royal Academy. She means to make the room large enough that your failure cannot be quietly corrected. My failure? Constance asked. Her word, not mine. Leopold took the card back before Constance could ask to see it. Then, remembering, he stopped and held it out to her. Forgive me. She accepted it. That mattered too. The card did not name Constance directly, but its meaning was unmistakable. A question of ducal provenance and unfortunate handling would be addressed before proper witnesses. Proper witnesses, she almost smiled. Cruelty loved that word, proper. It could make a trap sound like etiquette. Then tomorrow there will be no chance to be half cleared, she said. No, Leopold replied, only ruined or believed. Not believed, she said, setting the card down. Proven. The door opened again before anyone could answer. This time the butler entered, and his distress was visible despite long training. Your Grace, forgive the interruption. The evidence drawer in the small cabinet has been opened. Leopold went still. Opened how? The key remains with Mr. Havisham, as ordered. But the lock appears to have been picked. The porcelain lid is gone. For 1 second, the room emptied of sound. Matilda's hand tightened on the back of a chair. Mrs. Vale whispered, Dear heaven. Constance looked not at Leopold, but at the drawer across the room, where the false lid had been, because everyone had believed a locked piece of furniture in a ducal house was safe. There it was again. The old mistake. Believing rank could protect truth by enclosing it. Leopold crossed the library in 3 strides and opened the drawer himself. Empty, no lid, only torn paper and a faint dusting of bright blue-green glaze near the corner. He did not curse. He did not raise his voice. His restraint was more frightening. Who had access to this room? Household only, Your Grace, and Mr. Havisham. He swears the key never left him. Then someone came prepared. Constance moved to the drawer and looked at the dust. Not merely prepared. Hurried. Leopold turned to her. What do you see? The question steadied her. Even now, with evidence stolen and tomorrow looming, he asked. The paper tore outward, she said. Whoever took the lid caught it on the edge and did not stop to smooth the damage. A person confident of time hides disturbance. A frightened person removes only what he was sent for. Matilda's eyes sharpened. A servant, perhaps, or someone accustomed to sending servants and unused to doing theft personally. Leopold looked at the butler. No one leaves the house without being spoken to. Quietly, no alarm below stairs. The butler bowed and withdrew. Constance felt the weight of tomorrow shift again. Without the false lid, their chain still held, but weakened. The sketch proved the 3rd staple. The glove dust linked Aurelia to altered glaze. The shards showed absence. Mr. Pell could testify. Yet the lid would have made the deception visible to any fool, and society preferred proof it could see without thinking. They have taken the easiest object, Leopold said, not the truth. No, Constance replied, but they have made the truth work harder. His gaze rested on her. Then we shall work harder. It should have comforted her. It did, yet beneath the comfort came exhaustion so sudden She had to look away. The day had been full of evidence, apologies, threats, decisions, and now another theft. She had stood very straight through all of it. Her shoulders ached from dignity. Without quite knowing she meant to move, she stepped away from the table and toward the winter garden doors at the end of the library. "I need air," she said. "Mrs. Vale," Matilda began, but Constance shook her head. "Only the garden threshold. The doors may remain open." She entered the glassed winter garden where orange trees in tubs scented the cool air and rain traced silver lines down the panes. She did not weep. She was almost angry that she could not. Tears might have released something. Instead, the ache stayed locked behind her ribs, neat and unbearable. Footsteps sounded at the open door. Leopold did not enter fully. "May I stand here?" he asked. Constance nodded without turning. "You may." He came only as far as propriety allowed, with the library visible behind him and Matilda's dark gown a distant shape at the desk. "I am sorry about the lid. You did not steal it." "No, but Carrowmere pride thought a locked drawer was safer than distributed truth." Again. She looked at him then. The honesty in his face was not polished. It cost him something. You cannot make every failure into a family inheritance. Perhaps not, but I can admit when I have profited from one. He looked through the rain-streaked glass. All my life, I was taught that visible damage invited weakness. A crack in porcelain, a rumor in marriage, a hesitation in business. Cover it, contain it, control it. Yesterday, I saw what that lesson did to you. Today, I nearly trusted a lock more than a witness. His voice lowered. "I have no right to ask for your heart while your name is still under fire." The words struck so softly that, for a moment, she did not understand why she could not breathe. He had not said he loved her. Not yet. He had not asked for anything. He had done the opposite. He had named the boundary before desire could cross it. Constance turned fully. In the library behind him, Matilda lowered her gaze, giving them the mercy of not watching too closely. Constance stepped forward. Leopold did not move. He waited, as he had waited, when her palm turned upward over the brush case. She reached him and placed her arms around him before fear could instruct her to be sensible. The embrace was brief. It had to be. It was held within open doors, visible propriety, and the restraint of two people who understood that tenderness was not license. Yet for those few breaths, his arms came around her gently, not to claim, not to hide, but to answer. She felt the steadiness of him, the controlled breath that faltered once, and the care with which he let her be the first to loosen her hold. When she stepped back, his hands fell at once. His eyes remained on hers. "Constance," he said quietly. This time the sound of her name did not wound. It warmed. "Tomorrow," she said, though her voice was not as steady as she wished, "we leave the seam visible." Leopold bowed his head. "Tomorrow, we let them see who tried to hide it." From the library, Matilda's voice cut through with welcome briskness. "Then we require another witness for the lid, since the lid itself has decided to travel." Constance drew one slow breath and returned to the table. The embrace remained with her, not as safety, but as courage. The false lid was gone. The room at the Royal Academy would be larger than expected. Sir Bertram believed he had removed the proof that ordinary eyes could grasp. But he had forgotten something. Constance's mother had known all her life. A stolen piece still left an edge behind, and every edge remembered where it had been broken. The Royal Academy patronage room had been arranged to make truth look like an interruption. Long tables stood beneath high pale walls, their surfaces covered with velvet, porcelain fragments, catalogues, and labels written in elegant hands. Collectors gathered near Sir Bertram Hale, as if he were a judge rather than a man with too much interest in what remained hidden. Patronesses filled the chairs nearest Lady Aurelia Voss, who wore white muslin and the expression of a woman prepared to be pitied by important people. Constance entered with Matilda Ransom on one side and Mrs. Vale on the other, her mother's mending brush wrapped inside her reticule and the copied sketch carried in a portfolio at her arm. Leopold walked behind her by half a pace, not before her, not as a shield blocking every stare, close enough that when the room turned cruel, it would see he had chosen the place beside her. Sir Bertram's voice was already smooth with triumph. "Your Grace, Miss Farleigh, how gracious of you to attend. We had feared the distress of recent events might keep certain parties away." "Distress is rarely improved by leaving it to those who caused it," Constance said. A soft rustle passed through the room. Lady Aurelia lowered her lashes. "I do hope we might avoid bitterness. We are all here only for clarity." Leopold's voice came calm at Constance's shoulder. "Then today shall be a fortunate day for you, Lady Aurelia." Sir Bertram gestured toward the table, where the shattered pieces of the Carrowmere Peacock had been arranged by his hand in a pattern that flattered his argument. "The matter is painful but plain. An old heirloom, already delicate, was subjected to nervous and ignorant handling. The break occurred beneath the wing, where an amateur might have imagined a flaw and disturbed what caution should have left alone." He did not look at Constance when he said amateur. He did not need to. The room did it for him. Leopold shifted no more than an inch, but Constance felt the withheld force in him. He remembered his promise. He waited. Sir Bertram continued. "There has been wild talk of a missing third staple. I will show that the repair pattern always consisted of 2 gold supports. Any suggestion otherwise is confusion, perhaps encouraged by those eager to escape blame." Constance stepped forward. The floor beneath her seemed too polished, the air too thin, yet her hands were steady. Fear had been given a task. "May I examine the fragments as they have been placed?" Sir Bertram smiled. "By all means, though I caution the assembly that further handling may obscure the facts. Then I shall touch nothing until the facts invite it." A few mouths tightened. She opened the portfolio and laid Mr. Pell's copied sketch on the table, witnessed and dated. "This is a shop copy of the old repair diagram. It marks 3 staples beneath the wing." Sir Bertram waved one hand. "A copy prepared after. Scandal. Witnessed before this demonstration, by friends of His Grace, by a craftsman who knew my mother before His Grace knew me." That quiet sentence struck more deeply than she expected. Some of the older ladies leaned nearer. Constance pointed to the fragments without touching them. "Here are the 2 visible staple seats. Here is the empty scar where the third entered the porcelain. The break opened there because the support was removed before I ever touched the teapot." Lady Aurelia gave a soft, wounded laugh. "Such confidence, and yet the lid that might prove this supposed alteration has vanished. How convenient." "Convenient for whom?" Constance asked. Aurelia's smile froze. Sir Bertram stepped in. "Miss Farleigh, emotion cannot substitute for provenance." "No," Constance said, "nor can arrogance." A stir moved through the room. Sir Bertram's colour rose. Constance took out the sealed packet containing Mr. Pell's glazed trial and placed it beside Aurelia's glove, still wrapped in Leopold's handkerchief. "This dust was found in the seam of Lady Aurelia's glove after she touched the lid at Voss House." Aurelia stood. "That is outrageous. I touched nothing improper." "You touched the lid immediately before it slipped to help you, to hurry the trap." Leopold's voice cut through the room, low and controlled. "Miss Farleigh will finish." Constance looked at him once. He did not nod grandly. He simply held her gaze and let her continue. She turned back to the table. "The dust in the glove is brighter than old repair residue. It matches a newer glazed disturbance. Mr. Pell saw a trial piece of such glaze after a Voss footman asked whether old staples could be removed." Sir Bertram laughed. "An absent footman, an anxious tradesman, and a copied sketch. This is not evidence. It is performance. Then let us ask a question that porcelain can answer." Constance lifted one shard with permission from the solicitor and held it so light, struck the inner rim. If this was the original lid, why does its glaze remember a kiln Carrowmere never used? Silence fell. The question did what accusation could not. It forced every eye toward the shard, then toward Sir Bertram. Mr. Pell, pale but upright, stepped from the back of the room. "Because the lid was made later," he said, "or matched later. I saw a trial of that glaze. It was too clean to belong to the old body." Sir Bertram turned on him. "You were paid to say this?" Mr. Pell's voice shook but held. "No, sir. I was paid to deny the third staple. I refused." A gasp broke from Lady Montague. Lady Aurelia went white beneath her powder. Sir Bertram reached for composure and found only anger. "This is absurd. The lid is gone." From near the door came a small, frightened voice. "No, sir." A junior servant in Voss livery stepped forward, twisting his cap in both hands. Constance recognized the boy whose hands had trembled at the earlier displays. "I took it from the drawer as you told me through Mr. Griggs," he said, not looking up. "I was to throw it into the river, but I didn't. I hid it in my coat lining. I thought if I destroyed a duke's property, I'd never sleep again." He drew out a wrapped bundle. The solicitor took it, opened the cloth, and set the false lid on the table. Under the academy light, its beauty betrayed itself. The glaze shone too young, too bright, too eager to be believed. The room saw it now. Even those who knew nothing of porcelain understood the difference between age and imitation when placed beside the old shards. Sir Bertram's mouth opened, then closed. Lady Aurelia whispered, "I didn't know." Constance looked at her glove on the table. "Your glove knew." The words were quiet. They ended the performance. Voices rose at once, no longer in cruel delight, but in the unsettled murmur of people, discovering they had been led toward a lie and almost enjoyed the walk. Lady Montague withdrew her name from Lady Voss's exhibition before everyone. Another patroness said she could not support a display advised by Sir Bertram. The solicitor asked Sir Bertram to remain for questions regarding fraudulent provenance sales. Bertram tried to laugh, but no one smiled with him. Leopold stepped forward then, and the room obeyed the movement of his rank. "Before this assembly concerns itself with my property, it will hear me speak of Miss Farleigh's name. When the teapot broke, I hesitated. I allowed my family pride one breath of room where trust should have stood. I was wrong." Every face turned toward him. Constance felt the words enter the very place his hesitation had wounded. Miss Farleigh saw what trained collectors missed, what frightened servants hid, and what dishonest people hoped rank would obscure. "Carrowmere owes her public thanks. I owe her more." Lady Aurelia made a strangled sound. Leopold did not look at her. "The first understanding between us began as a strategy forced by my mother's alarm and society's appetite. Let that truth be plain. But what I offer Miss Farleigh now is not strategy, rescue, or gratitude. It is real only if she chooses it freely, and I will not ask for her answer as entertainment." Constance's throat tightened. For once, No one seemed able to speak over her. She looked around the room that had expected her ruin and gave it nothing more than dignity. "His Grace is correct," she said. "My answer is not society's refreshment." Later, when the room had broken into consequences and the first sharp rush of judgment had passed, Leopold found her in the half-open gallery passage beyond the patronage room. The door remained ajar. Voices carried. Propriety stood within sight. But privacy, fragile and necessary, had been granted by distance. He held the temporary ring in his palm. "May I ask for your hand, Constance?" She looked at the ring, then at him. "You may ask. May I place this back where it belongs only if you wish it there?" Her answer came with a breath that trembled and steadied at once. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with care, not as proof for others, but as promise returned. His thumb did not linger until she turned her hand and caught his fingers. Then he held on. "May I kiss you?" he asked. The question was quiet enough for her alone. Constance stepped nearer. "Yes, Leopold." The kiss was gentle, brief, and entirely theirs. It did not erase scandal. It followed justice. When he lifted his head, his composure had vanished into something warmer and more vulnerable. "I love you, Constance, not because you saved my name, but because you taught me not to fear the truth beneath a crack." Tears touched her eyes at last, and this time she did not despise them. "I love you, Leopold, freely or not at all, and it is freely." From the doorway, Matilda's voice came softly, full of triumph and humility both. "Then we shall hold one more tea, and this time no one will sit alone." 6. Weeks after the Royal Academy demonstration, the road to Wychmere Park ran through Hampshire fields washed clean by morning rain, and Constance Farleigh watched from the carriage window as London's smoke gave way to hedgerows, pale sheep, and the first full green of summer. She had expected the distance to feel like escape. Instead, it felt like arrival after a long misunderstanding with her own life. Beside her, Matilda Ransom sat with a travelling rug over her knees and a list of household arrangements in one hand, though she had not looked at it for the last half hour. Opposite them, Mrs. Vale dozed with the respectable determination of a chaperone who had earned sleep through several weeks of scandal. Leopold rode ahead for the final mile, having insisted on reaching the house first, to receive them properly, though Constance suspected he wished to ensure that no servant, guest, or curious neighbour treated her as an ornament added to Carrowmere. After the danger had passed, the ring on her finger caught the pale light whenever the carriage turned. It was the same temporary ring returned at the Royal Academy, yet it no longer felt temporary. Nothing had been rushed after that day. Leopold had called with Matilda, then with his solicitor, then with invitations properly acknowledged and answers properly made. Her father's name had been cleared in writing and in drawings rooms. Lady Montague had apologized with more tears than Constance had expected and more embarrassment than she needed. Mr. Pell's shop had acquired new commissions from honest collectors, who suddenly discovered that visible repair was tasteful when a duke praised it. Sir Bertram Hale had not been arrested in any dramatic fashion, for society preferred quieter punishments among men who had once dined well, but his provenance sales were under solicitors' scrutiny. His clients had withdrawn their trust, and his name now caused careful pauses wherever porcelain was discussed. Lady Aurelia Voss had gone to country relations after 3 patronesses declined to receive her. Constance had felt no triumph in that, only a grave satisfaction that beauty had not been allowed to keep lying simply because it was beautiful. "You are very quiet," Matilda said. Constance turned from the window. I was thinking of the first tea. At Montague House? Yes. I was sitting beside the cabinet because no one wished to speak to me. Matilda looked down at her gloved hands. And I sat beside you because I wished to use you. At first, Constance said. Matilda's mouth curved faintly, but there was humility in it. At first, I have rehearsed several graceful replies to that accusation, but none of them improve the truth. The truth has improved. Enough, has it? Yes. Constance looked back toward the road, where the roofs of Witchmere Park began to appear beyond a line of oaks. Because you did not leave your apology in private, Matilda's voice softened. No woman should be made public in shame and private in repair. The carriage turned through iron gates. Witchmere Park rose ahead, warm stone and long windows facing a sweep of lawn. Servants stood arranged before the entrance, but not in stiff curiosity. Leopold must have spoken to them. Constance knew it the moment she saw Mrs. Hobbs, the housekeeper, step forward with no appraising glance at Constance's gown, no flicker of doubt toward her hands, only a curtsy deep enough to honor the woman her master had chosen. Leopold waited at the foot of the steps. He did not smile broadly. That would have been too much for servants and guests and a mother watching everything. But his face changed when Constance descended. The change was quiet and unmistakable. Miss Farleigh, he said, offering his hand. Welcome to Witchmere. She placed her gloved fingers in his. This time there was no performance in the contact, no room waiting to devour its meaning. Thank you, Your Grace. His thumb did not move across her glove. His hand merely held hers long enough to steady her descent, then released because the servants watched. Yet his eyes said what the gesture did not. Matilda climbed down behind her and addressed the household in a voice that carried across stone and gravel. You will know Miss Farleigh not as a guest rescued by circumstance, but as the lady whose judgment preserved the honor of this house when pride nearly obscured it. She is to be treated with the respect due to His Grace's chosen future Duchess. The words moved through the assembled servants like sunlight reaching a dark room. Constance felt her throat tighten, not from embarrassment, but from the strange ache of public respect given after public injury. She curtsied slightly, not because servants outranked her, but because gratitude did not become smaller when offered downward. Leopold saw the gesture. His expression warmed. Later, in the great drawing room, Matilda held the tea she had promised. Not a crowded London tea, crowded with traps, but a bright estate gathering of neighbours. 2 old patronesses, Mr. Pell with his best coat, brushed to shine. Mr. Farleigh seated near the fire, looking both proud and overwhelmed, and several widows and impoverished gentlewomen from Hampshire villages who had been invited for a reason they did not yet fully understand. At the center of the room stood a cabinet newly placed where the light fell best. Inside, it rested the Carrowmere Peacock Teapot. It had not been restored to false perfection. The broken wing had been mended. The old brake line remained visible. Beneath it shone a new gold staple, placed where the missing one had been, not to pretend age, but to admit repair. Beside the teapot lay Constance's mother's sable brush in a velvet-lined case. The handle still showed the worn place where her mother's fingers had held it. The sight made Constance suddenly unable to speak. Leopold stood beside the cabinet, close enough that she felt his presence, but not so close that he claimed the moment for himself. Mr. Pell insisted the new staple be visible, he said. Mr. Pell was correct. He said he had learned from a formidable woman. Constance looked at the brush. My mother would have said he exaggerated, then corrected the angle. Leopold smiled softly. Matilda called the room to attention. She spoke first of the Royal Academy, then of honest labour, then of the new workshop to be funded at Wychmere for widows and impoverished gentlewomen trained in delicate repair, cataloguing, and preservation. Miss Farleigh will direct the work, she said, because skill should not be hidden behind curtains until a household breaks something. Mr. Farleigh covered his eyes briefly. Mr. Pell looked down hard at his teacup. Constance stood at the centre of the room and understood, with quiet amazement, that no one had placed her there as a trap. After tea, when the guests wandered toward the music room, and Matilda deliberately occupied Mr. Farleigh with a question about Hampshire roads, Leopold led Constance to the winter garden. The doors remained open behind them. Orange trees scented the air. Rainwater still clung to the glass roof in bright beads, though the sun had come out. They walked hand in hand along the tiled path, slowly enough that propriety could keep pace. "You are certain about the workshop?" Leopold asked. "I am certain about the work, less certain about directing women who may be twice my age and far less inclined to obey me than porcelain. Then they will be fortunate. To obey me, to be seen by you." She looked at him. The flattery, if it was flattery, carried no polish. It had the plainness she trusted in him now. "And you?" she asked. "Are you certain about a duchess who places repaired teapots where guests can notice the seams?" "I am depending on her to do so. Your ancestors may object from their portraits. They have had several generations to speak. I am prepared to let you answer." She laughed then, quietly and freely, and the sound seemed to surprise them both. Leopold stopped beside a potted orange tree and lifted her hand. "May I?" he asked. It was only her gloved knuckles, only a gesture that could have been performed before any drawing room in England, but the question mattered because he still asked. "Yes," she said. He bent and kissed her gloved hand. The tenderness of it moved through her more deeply than a grand declaration would have done. He straightened but did not release her. "I love you, Constance," he said. "I told you first, when truth still had smoke on it. I tell you now, when the house is quiet, because I want you to hear it without witnesses needing proof." Her fingers tightened around his. "I love you, Leopold, and I will marry you not because you saved me." His eyes held hers. "No, not because your mother chose me. No, not because society finally approved what it once mocked. Never that." She stepped closer, still within the open garden doors, still safe side the restraint that had taught them both patience. "I will marry you because you learned to stand beside me." His voice softened. "And I will spend my life remembering the difference." She leaned against his arm for one brief moment, and he remained still until she chose to move again. When they returned to the drawing room, the afternoon light had shifted across the cabinet. The Peacock Teapot shone not as something untouched, but as something truthful. Beside it, in the velvet case, her mother's brush lay quiet and honored, its worn handle turned toward the room, the gold staple visible beneath the wing.